Princess Hao confidently declared that she would wait for Sha Fengliao to triumph over the last demon and become the greatest warrior on the continent. According to her, their wedding would be an event of unprecedented scale. Sha Fengliao, the strongest warrior, assured the princess of his inevitable victory. He went to the battlefield to fight a powerful level 555 demon named Okiang Baola. Approaching his opponent, Sha coldly declared that it was time for the demon to meet his end. At that moment, he remembered that today marked 18 years since the beginning of his service in the army. He led an elite force of humanity sent to destroy the supreme demon. And if they manage to defeat this monster, humanity will be able to regain its lost greatness. With a powerful blow of his sword, he cut the demon in two and proclaimed that the 1,000-year war between demons and humans was coming to an end and that humanity would achieve final victory. But the demon, with difficulty pronouncing the words, doubted this and croaked, "Do you really think so?" At that very moment, the Sha system began to light up with numerous warnings of critical danger. The demon, rapidly increasing in size, declared that if he was destined to die, then only together with Sha. Sha froze in place and, shaking his head in surprise, quietly muttered, "Well, well." Before he could react, there was a deafening explosion, blinding everything around. Suddenly, the system informed Sha that he had only 2 minutes left in his life. She congratulated him on the 511 squad's significant contribution to humanity and offered him a one-time reincarnation. When the system asked for his decision, Sha touched the revive button with force and thought, why not? The next moment, he heard a voice calling him to wake up, as the squad was already close. Opening his eyes, Sha realized that he had a new chance. He jumped to his feet and joyfully announced that he had killed the demon lord, adding that everything had turned out to be much easier than he had expected. But, looking around, he noticed a crowd of demons who were looking at him with obvious bewilderment. Sha frowned and asked in annoyance why he was among these ugly demons. He was interrupted by Gunner Lao Te, who warned that the Blue Alliance was about to arrive and suggested that they leave immediately. Sha, feeling himself, expressed complete confusion and asked what all this meant and what they were talking about. Walking towards a mirror, he saw in the reflection an E-rank demon warrior named Gon Leo. Shocked by what he saw, he stood frozen in place, trying to comprehend what was happening. His thoughts were confused, and his voice trembled as he asked in bewilderment how he could become a demon. Leo, overcome with rage, screamed, demanding an explanation from the system. He accused it of having nothing to do with rebirth, reminding it that he was the light of the human race and that his bride was waiting for him at home. The demons, watching this scene, looked at each other. One of them noted with bewilderment that Leo was clearly unwell, and the other agreed, adding that he was clearly not himself. The system apologized, explaining that an error had occurred during his rebirth. Leo became even more angry and demanded that the situation be corrected immediately. However, the system responded that the error could not be corrected. Leo grabbed her and, squeezing, continued to insist on his own. The system only repeated its apology and explained that the reincarnation was a one-time thing. A moment later, the system notified that if Leo died a natural death, he could be reborn as a human again, but suicide did not count. Having added that a new rebirth is possible only in the event of true death, the system disappeared. The demons continued to whisper. One of them asked what was wrong with this new demon. Laote replied that Leo looked normal, but too timid. Another demon suggested that if humans attacked, Leo would have a hard time. Meanwhile, Leo, stepping aside, quietly whispered through tears that his bride would definitely wait for him. Demoness Lao Mayer concentrated her power to sense the approach of the enemies. Soon, she warned the others that she sensed 12 people approaching. She noted with alarm that, with the exception of their B-plus rank leader, none of them would be able to resist the enemies, and the key warrior had already been captured. The panic in her voice grew as she added that they needed to get to an escape route as quickly as possible. Otherwise, if they fell into enemy hands, they would die a painful death. Leo, hearing these words, thought that the Blue Union was already close, which meant that there were people there. At that moment, an unexpected thought struck him. Since he was now also a monster, then let his own people kill him. Without wasting any time, Leo headed towards the exit of the shelter. The demons, shouting after him, asked in surprise what he was doing, calling him crazy and reminding him that there were people outside. He stopped and said confidently that hiding was not the best option. He said that he would hold off the enemies so that the rest could escape. The demons looked at each other, shocked by his words. One of them, surprised, assumed that Leo intended to sacrifice himself to save them. The old man, frowning, asked if he understood what he was saying. Suddenly, rocks began to fall from above near Leo. Surprised, he realized that there had been a collapse and assumed that it might be magic. At that moment, the girl Lu appeared, confidently declaring that they had grown up together and would not leave each other at a critical moment. Leo cursed mentally, displeased with her interference, and thought that she was interfering with his reincarnation plan. Clenching his fist, he tried to forcefully break through the blockage and shouted at her not to interfere. But he was unsuccessful. He got angry and said through his teeth, "You pathetic little bug." But he thought to himself how painful it was. The girl, clearly surprised by his words, raised her eyebrows slightly and repeated them. And Lao Te, flushed with anger, glared and demanded an explanation of how he dared to call her that. Leo, trying to change the subject, enthusiastically stated that he should not be underestimated. His words and determination impressed Lu, and she blushed slightly, noting to herself that she hadn't noticed how enticing his scent was before. One of the demons suggested retreating and told the others to ignore Leo. Another supported him, adding that if he wanted to die, then so be it. Leo, angry, shouted after the demons to leave. He growled with contempt. Will people be afraid of them? After all, they won't be able to give them the slightest resistance. He emphasized that they were incapable of confronting the enemy, so he would sacrifice himself to save the others. He hoped inwardly that the demons would stop looking at him. Lu, holding back tears, watched him go, and Lao Te, pushing her, reminded her that it was time to leave. But she, worried, refused. Meanwhile, Leo, filled with joyful hope, ran towards the exit of the cave, confident that death awaited him. Finding a group of people, he shouted loudly, "Forward, children!" He is ready to take all the blows and meet them without fear. Leo, with a cheeky grin, provoking his opponents, offered to show them his combat experience. The enraged warriors immediately rushed at him, shouting for his capture. He, watching them approach, thought with joy about his long-awaited revival and return to the human race. But before the warriors could reach him, shots came from the other side. One of them shouted loudly, "Ambush!" Lao Te, in his highest state, with cold calm reminded the people that over the past 3 years he had almost managed to forget about the old enmity. Leo froze in surprise, and the system notified him that the demon clan had used their unique skills and significantly strengthened their members. Lao Te, recalling the past, reproached the people for invading their lands time after the death of the demon lord. He stated that because the demons were unable to put up a decent fight, humans continued to kill them and plunder their resources. He added that humans did not even consider the possibility of compromise. Lao Te patted Leo on the shoulder and said that he was right. Leo, stunned, did not understand anything and simply watched what was happening in confusion. At that moment, reinforcements appeared, and Lu, activating her powers, declared that it was time to fight back against the demons. The squad of warriors, not believing their eyes, began to scream in confusion, not understanding what was happening. Leo, still confused, thought with his mouth open that all this seemed unreal to him. Lu, having assumed her highest form, soared into the air and confidently declared that the demons had no intention of retreating. The warriors, amazed by what was happening, recalled that the highest rank among demons was B, and asked in bewilderment where a fighter of such a level came from. Another warrior, shocked, exclaimed that it was impossible. Lu, concentrating a huge amount of magical energy in her hand, released a powerful wave of destruction straight at the squad of warriors. The power of her attack was so great that after the blow, only a pile of ash remained of them, and thus the Blue Alliance fell. Leo, looking at all this nervously, realized that not only did he not die, but he also received a promotion. The system informed him that for destroying the Blue Alliance, he had been promoted to level 10, reaching rank D. It also added that if he died, he would be able to be reborn into the human clan. Leo did not move, and tears rolled down his cheeks. He thought bitterly that it would be better for him to die than to rise. In the Hua family's mansion, Demon Lord's assistant Chong Dutsao frowned and asked if their plan had failed. The subordinate confirmed with a guilty expression that they had indeed calculated the moment when Her Highness would be surrounded by the Blue Union in a state of greatest despair. He added that it was then that Mr. Wujuan should have come with the soldiers and saved her, demonstrating his boundless charm and courage. After this, according to the plan, Wujuan was supposed to destroy all enemies and take the princess into his arms, causing her to fall in love with him. However, no one expected that the demons themselves would deal with the Blue Union, and the princess would awaken her royal power. Chong Dutsao thought about what he heard and nervously said, "Overall, isn't this all good?" At this point, one of the three great military leaders, General Hoan, declared that in any case, all military power was in his hands. Given his status, the court will be forced to agree to the princess's marriage to his son, and no one will dare to object. The general then ordered that his son be informed that they would go to propose tomorrow, adding that he had long foreseen the failure of this plan. Meanwhile, Lu, taking a bath, thought that she did not expect such courage from Xiao Gan at a dangerous moment. She called the maid Mel and asked her to bring Xiao Gan to the court so that she could reward him. Mel smiled wryly, thinking that the reward sounded quite interesting. She replied that she would carry out the order. Lu, noticing her expression, was mentally indignant at what the maid could be thinking. Meanwhile, Leo was drinking and, looking at the system, noticed that he had accumulated a lot of points that needed to be distributed among the characteristics. Frustrated, he shouted loudly that it was time to die, but it turned out to be more difficult than he thought. The system showed an increase in strength, speed, elemental power, and spirit. Leo thought that level D was not that strong, but it was clearly superior to humans. He wondered with frustration who could kill him. At that moment, the maid Mel appeared and loudly announced that Her Highness was looking for him. Leo, seeing her, was delighted, called her sister, and said that she was finally here and dragged her into another room. Mel, blushing, indignantly asked what he was up to and reminded him that he was drunk. Leo brought her to the torture chamber and pleadingly declared that only she could help him and asked her to kill him. Mel agreed with surprise, and Leo, not believing her words, asked again, "Is it true?" She thought that Xiao Gan was usually not so fierce. Was it all because of the drink? Then, suddenly pulling out a hammer, she hit him on the head, and he instantly lost consciousness. After that, Mel quietly said that today was not the best time. He should go to Her Highness. Sometime later, in the main room, Lu praised Leo for his amazing performance and announced that she was awarding him the title of First Class. From now on, he could freely enter the palace. She also gave him the King of Killers costume, explaining that it would help him become a true hero. Mel, holding the suit, mentally admired it, realizing that this reward was the sacred robe of the past Demon King, the best that could be rewarded. The system briefly described this suit as the equipment of the past Demon King, greatly increasing the wearer's power. Leo thought, yes, very useful. Taking the equipment, he thanked them and, leaving, said that if that was all, it was time for him to go. Lu and Mel, looking at him, thought that he had become so determined. Lu, without taking her eyes off him, with a slight blush, said in admiration that he had grown a lot and had become a handsome man. At this time, one of the three great legislators, Wei, noticing Leo's departure, was mentally outraged that he had been given such important equipment. He thought with annoyance that such a reward was unacceptable for a simple soldier. Wei remembered how he had helped Her Highness all his life, but she did not appreciate it or even thank him. She forces him to side with Manhwa. Suddenly Leo came up to Wei and said, "Hey, old man." Wei thought with instant anger, what did he call him? Impudent. Leo, as if not noticing his anger, handed him the equipment and said with an unperturbed look, "I'll give it to you." Wei, stunned, asked again if he was really giving him this valuable artifact. Leo sighed and confirmed that this was true, and thought that his goal was to die, not to become stronger. Then, putting his hand on Wei's shoulder, he added that Her Highness valued his work very much, so she had instructed him to reward him. He asked that this thing be treated with care. After Leo left, Wei, unable to hold back his tears, regretfully asked for forgiveness from Her Highness and promised to make things right. Leo sat down on the step and thought that everything was still the same here, and decided that tomorrow he would go looking for a new opportunity to die. Suddenly he heard two people talking. One of them happily said, "Sir, welcome back," and the other replied that his father had called him away urgently. Then the first one reported that the general had decided to implement the plan tomorrow. He will lead the demon army and propose to the princess on behalf of the Lord. If anyone is against it, they will simply be killed. Leo, hearing this, was delighted, realizing that this was exactly what he needed. He decided to act. The next day, all the participants gathered in the spacious conference room of Yunhua, ready for an important conversation. Leo held his head in his hands, thinking that he hadn't expected the morning meeting to be so gloomy. He whispered quietly to himself to get to the point. Chong began his report. He said that the human army was preparing to attack, but thanks to the general's help they managed to avoid the attack. He noted that they had maintained their respect for Her Royal Majesty for 3 years, and that her power had now greatly increased. Lu, with genuine admiration, added that the general deserved praise, since he had been in command since her grandfather's reign. She offered to reward him generously. Huan said with a slight smile that since Her Majesty had suggested it, he had something. He then ordered Wu Juan to come forward and suggested that Wu Juan marry Lu, explaining that they had grown up together. Lu happily exclaimed that they hadn't seen each other for 3 years and asked if Wu Juan had anyone he liked. Huan continued, strongly suggesting that Her Majesty become Wu Juan's wife. Lu, not expecting such a turn of events, cried out to the general not to joke like that. She hurried to explain that she and Wu Juan were not on that kind of relationship. The general countered that it was not that important. He added that doubts should be cast aside, since the demon clan had never been led by a woman, and many were losing confidence in them. He continued by stating that when Her Highness ascended the throne, there would be civil strife. However, if she married Wu Juan, no one would dare to say anything. The entire army, supporting him, began to say that the general was right. Yes, that's right. Mr. Wu Juan is unusually handsome and brave, an ideal candidate for a husband. Lao Te indignantly cried out that this was nonsense and that there was no point in giving into it, Your Majesty. Lu began to speak hesitantly, but at that moment Leo smirked and said that perhaps this was his chance. He immediately headed to the center of events, and Lao Te exclaimed, what was he thinking of doing? Leo took Lu's hand and told her not to agree with them, because everyone is free and has the right to decide for themselves who to marry. Lu blushed at such a pleasant gesture and said "Gone," Leo hesitantly. Leo interrupted her and, looking at Lao Te, exclaimed who gave him the right to tell their leader what to do. Wei Ming looked at Leo in surprise and said, "Is this the same young man?" He remembered how Leo gave him the equipment the day before. Lu lowered her head, realizing that there was no other way out, and apologized to the general. The general, looking at her angrily, replied that he had done everything to ensure that the clan prospered. He proudly declared that he was the only general appointed for 2 terms at once, a great commander who was honored by all the servants. He said threateningly that the Royal Highness should think it over carefully before giving a final answer. Lao Te, releasing arrows, told him not to even think about capturing the palace. He would not let him. Wei Ming held him and exclaimed that Hua and should watch his behavior. The general confidently declared that he had an entire army in his hands, and who among them would dare to oppose him? Lu, completely resigned, said that they had to stop. The general was right. She had to agree. Suddenly Leo laughed and asked why she gave up so easily. Didn't she have royal blood in her? He smiled, making a sly and smug face, full of challenge, asking if she was really scared. The general approached him and asked who he was. But Leo, instead of answering, spat right in his face. And, slapping him on the cheek, he said, "Yes, he's a great general, but who gave him the right to command? Is he from a herd of cows or the leader of dogs? Did he decide to mock her?" The general, perplexed, asked what he was talking about. Leo added with confidence that besides, she was the strongest demon. Her status was more important than them. She was stronger than 10,000 people put together. Was his son worthy of her? The general growled angrily and said that his son was the strongest, and who could be more worthy than him? Leo replied that he was worthy and added that they had been together in the cave just a couple of days ago. Leo, seeing that the general was angry, thought with hope that now he would definitely destroy him. Lao Te was surprised and thought how Xiaogan dared to go against the general, and Mel was amazed and thought that Xiaogan was so courageous. Everyone around started saying that when Her Highness was surrounded by the Blue Union, they said it was he who stood up for her. Another asked if it was true, since he had never seen him. Lu, blushing and admiring Leo, thought that for her sake he was taking such a big risk. The general asked him angrily if he wanted to die, and Leo, expecting death, replied, "Go ahead, let him kill him." The general growled that he would regret his words. He would kill him and eat him whole. Everyone around started running away, saying that the general's enormous power would destroy everything around. It was all over. The general, concentrating all his incredible strength with furious anger in his eyes, directed it straight at Leo's stomach. Wei Ming, trying to stop it, thought with annoyance that he definitely wouldn't make it in time. Leo, happily imagining the picture of his return, said that Hao Jing was waiting for him and they would meet soon. There was a deafening explosion, tearing apart the silence and sweeping away everything in its path. But looking closely at the fire, Ho noticed a silhouette and exclaimed in shock, "What the hell?" The system announced to Leon that he had received the demonic order and that a fatal injury had been prevented. She then added that with the demonic order, he had defeated an army unit and reached level 40. His skills had been upgraded, his defense had increased, his stats had increased by 5 points, and his resistance would trigger after 15 hits, activating a critical hit. The entire army, unable to believe their eyes, exclaimed that he had overthrown the general. This was the first time such a thing had happened. No one had ever withstood his blow before. One of them said that a demon who received the order would receive the complete trust of all demons and would be given the important position of commander-in-chief in the future. Lu, having transformed into the highest state, said that her grandfather and father had bestowed the order, and from that moment on, Gan Leo would become the leader of the Yungue army of soldiers and receive the highest award. She also added that now Gan Leo will become a general and will lead the demon army together with Hua. The general thought that he could now take away Lu Bingyi's power, since he was confident that no one was superior to him in strength and power. Wei Ming greeted the new general and warmly expressed his sincere congratulations, following which all those present supported him, shouting out their congratulations. Leon exclaimed in disappointment, "Fuck! What the hell? The difficulty has increased again." The general expressed doubt that the demonic order could gain Her Highness's trust and added that Gan Leo did not have enough experience to lead the army. He also declared that only he, being related to the ancestors, was worthy of power. Ancestor Lu Yun was the most important among them. Only those who were recognized by the ancestors were worthy of power. If he could earn the ancestors' approval, then he would pass on power to him. Lao Te shouted at him to go away. No one had left his hideout alive for 100 years. What was he going to do? Wei Ming added that General Gan had already proven himself. Was it time to listen to the demon lord, or would he resist again? Liu expressed concern, believing that going to the ancestors' cave was mortally dangerous. Leon's eyes lit up as he suddenly realized that no one had ever come out of there alive. The general laughed loudly and maliciously, after which he said defiantly that since they did not agree. Leo interrupted him with delight and exclaimed that becoming a general was a great idea. He completely agreed and was ready to go immediately. Where to go? Everyone was so shocked that they froze for a moment, and then, not believing their ears, they stared at him with an expression of complete bewilderment. 200 years ago, the demon clan faced a great threat, and Lord Liu sacrificed himself to save it, sealing the remains of their soul so that it could be used to pass the deadly trial. However, no one was able to complete it. Wei Ming explained that a team of at least 2 people was required to enter the cave, and asked who would go with General Gone. The crowd began to get restless, saying that no one would go there because it was too dangerous and no one would want to risk their lives. The general said that in that case, let him go alone. If he can't even find a partner, what talk can there be about managing an entire army? Suddenly, Ho raised his hand, his gaze was determined, and with complete confidence, he declared that he would go with him despite all the risks. The general angrily asked, what did he just say? Who would let him go? Ho, without losing his composure, replied, does father really think that he is worse than him? Someone objected with discontent. It's impossible. He is the future of Yunhua. How can he take such a risk? Ho exclaimed decisively that he also wanted to demonstrate his strength to his ancestor, because he would be the future ruler of Yunhua. Everyone around them said with inspiration that they expected nothing less from Mr. Wujuan. Each of them strives to have the same determination and strength. The general, not believing what had happened, covered his face with his hand, as if trying to hide his confusion. After a while, Chong said that the gentleman had made the right decision, but he had to act with caution. He had been brave and decisive since childhood. He added that during their journey through the cave, he might even destroy it himself. Ho, calmly straightening his hair, answered with restraint that he understood everything perfectly. In another room, a girl warned Leon, saying that Ho was a cruel and selfish man who would stab him in the back if given the chance. Leo thought with excitement that this was a great chance, plus an additional opportunity to die. Wei said he had the best restorative and healing potions. The cave is very dangerous, and you need to watch your health carefully. Leo, slightly irritated and angry, said that they were too worried about him. The next day, everyone gathered in the ancestors' cave. Leo, showing his bag, said that he had pills especially for him. The girl, looking at everyone, asked if they were really ready for what awaited them in the cave. Liu, with a worried expression on her face, quietly whispered to Xiao Gan, please be careful. Leo, with bright excitement in his eyes, extended his fist and shouted forward. The girl activated a huge teleportation seal, saying formation, and everyone was plunged into bewilderment, not yet knowing that soon the true Lord of the Demons would appear to the world. A copy of the ancestral test has opened. This is the place where the D-level space, ghost bats, are able to remain invisible for a long time. Ho said with surprise that he didn't think that there would be such monsters in the cave. Leo remembered the girl's words that Ho Wujuan was very cruel and selfish. He would never leave him alive. He would stab him in the back. So he had to be careful. So he spread his arms and said with an ironic smile that he was so defenseless, like an open target, very weak. Ho thought, what is he doing? Ho, observing his behavior, thought that it was not worth exposing himself to the enemy. Leo hopefully thought that if he stood with his back to Ho, he would attack and kill him. Ho concentrated his attention, formed a seal, and transformed. At that moment, his hand was filled with energy and a huge blade was attached to it. Leo, with a smile on his face, thought that this was exactly what he needed, but suddenly Ho shouted flowers. He rushed forward with lightning speed and with one precise blow cut the flower next to the monster. Immediately after that, he made another swift blow, mercilessly destroying the monster, cutting it into pieces. Leo, completely stunned by what was happening, froze in place and watched in bewilderment. All the bats woke up, changed their shape, and started attacking them. Ho raised his hand, and using his ability, he snapped his finger, saying the word poison. In an instant, the entire space was filled with many cuts. Ho asked. He had noticed the hidden enemies long ago, hadn't he? He wanted to be bait to lure them out, make them come closer, and then let the strongest demon deal with them. Not bad. Ho looked at him defiantly and said, so that he wouldn't think that he could catch him off guard. Leo, not expecting such a turn of events, exclaimed in shock that he swears he didn't see them at all. Ho, looking at him with a slight grin, smiled, and, not believing his words, said, well, of course. He then waved his hands and said the word kill, cutting the remaining mice into pieces. Ho clapped his hands, saying the word storm, and at that moment, a blazing flame burst out around, engulfing everything around. Leo thought irritably that he just wanted to set himself up, but now he decided that they were partners, and now all the monsters were running to him. Due to the extremely powerful damage, the mice trigger a response reaction and begin to rush to save their relatives. Leo thought that now not only had he not killed him, but he had also destroyed the potential killers. The danger level was 0. Apparently, he was safe here. The thought came to mind that they should be forced to destroy him. He opened the system and thought that he had 480 unallocated points. Where should he distribute them? Ho guessed that they were in the deepest part of the map. He thought to himself that Leo was still doing nothing. He suspected that he was not strong enough to fight monsters. Suddenly, an earthquake began. The system immediately warned of the danger and reported that this was a battle with the envoy of the Demon Lord. The system immediately responded, reporting that the battle difficulty was A level and the time limit for completing it was only 20 minutes. The conditions for completing it were clearly defined. Destroy the defense of the Demon Lord's envoy. Ho suddenly waved his hand, and immediately after, an exploding flower flew towards the demon messenger, shining with a bright light before exploding. However, the monster grabbed the flower with his hands, putting his power into it, and threw the fiery boulder back. Ho managed to transform into his highest form in time and smash the boulder to pieces. But suddenly another monster intervened in the battle, sending out thorny vines, quickly tying up Ho. Ho looked at Leo in despair and cried out inwardly, "Let him do something already. It was a waste of time. He shouldn't have gone with him." Leo, wiping away his sweat with satisfaction, laughed and happily said that he didn't expect anything else from himself. Then he thought that he only had 480 points of strength, and his defense was weak. He needed to turn his attention to himself as soon as possible. Ho, accumulating strength, thought that this outcome was to be expected. Apparently, he is the strongest. Well, it's time to use the strongest attack. His green lightning tore the vines apart with terrifying speed, leaving only charred pieces. Ho, with fury in his eyes, aimed a whole barrage of needles straight at the monster and, without holding back his anger, shouted die. Then, snapping his fingers, he uttered an explosion. The needles immediately exploded with a powerful force, sweeping away everything around. But even his strongest attack left no trace on the monsters. Their defense was on a completely different level. Ho, confused, nervously asked what the envoy had any weaknesses at all. Defense at the highest level. The monster concentrated its power and created a black hole that swept away everything in its path. Ho shouted, "Bad things." Suddenly, the monster grabbed him and threw him away like a useless thing. The monster's attention was drawn to Leo. Leo, surprised, said that he destroyed it with his attack. It turns out that his strength is not small. Ho, in disbelief, thought that he had blown up the demonic messenger with just one blow. So that's it. The messenger has strong defense in the front, so he needs to attack from behind. He smirked and guessed that was why he was standing there like a pillar. He had figured out long ago and was just hiding his strength. He had deliberately let the demonic messenger attack him, so he could strike him from behind. Ho praised him and said that he was quite interesting. The system warned that since Leon had dealt an extremely powerful attack, the monster's attention had now shifted to him. Leo thought happily and confidently that the plan was working as it should. Now he was their target. He charged at them with the thought that A-rank demons were very strong and had high attack power. With his current defense level, the monster would deal with them in just one hit. Leo, filled with determination and unafraid of fear, challenged the monster. "Come here." The monster immediately pounced on him. Leo was already happy that he would soon become a man again. He met his death with a smile, as if ready to accept it as a liberation. But Ho threw the flower in time, and with fury in his voice, shouted, "Thorns, poison." At the same moment, the monster was surrounded by many sharp cuts. A second later, the monster collapsed to the ground, completely in pieces, its body falling apart. In the end, only 3 demon lord envoys remained on the battlefield. Leo, stunned, could not believe such an unexpected turn of events. Ho said his strategy was not bad, and he's glad he realized their weakness was their back. Good thing he set him up first. Then he added that he understood everything. The system notified that due to the powerful damage inflicted, the monster's object had changed, and now they would attack his comrade. Leo, disappointed, grabbed his head and thought with annoyance, what does he understand? And poison. Now they definitely won't defeat him. All the remaining monsters, furiously targeting Ho, began to chase him. Leo, noticing this, shouted in panic that they were his. "Come back." He concentrated all his power into his hand, and with amazing force, he tore through the monster's body, making a huge hole in its body. Now all the monster's eyes were once again focused on Leo, and the entire focus of the battle was concentrated on him. He, with a mocking challenge, shouted for them to kill him and, satisfied, awaited his death. But because Leo distracted their attention, Ho deftly attacked the monster from behind and destroyed it. Ho became their target again and, running away from them, shouted, "No, kill him." Leo shouted furiously for them not to leave. Leo instantly caught up with the monster and, delivering a powerful blow, said, "Take it," and only then thought, damn, he used too much force. But there was only one last monster left. Leo thought with hope that this was his last chance. He approached him as close as possible and, defiantly, shouted, "Hit him." The monster concentrated a huge amount of power in his hand and, with a furious expression, directed it straight at Leo. But in an instant the monster was cut into pieces, its body falling apart without even having time to react to the attack. The system has announced that the last one has been killed, and that all the messengers of the Demon Lord have been destroyed. Ho said it was a good strategy. He never thought their cooperation would be so fruitful. Leo thought with hatred and irritation, damn him. What did he do? Why did he destroy them? Ho, pointing at Leo, said that he was glad to meet him, and that he would be a worthy opponent in the future. But at that moment, the ground was cut by a deep cut. Leo dodged in time and stepped back, avoiding falling. A stern voice came from underground, saying that no one had reached this place in the last few decades. He added that he thought that the current demonic youth would no longer dare to enter these lands. A huge dragon appeared, emitting a devastating aura of power. He said that he congratulated them on passing the test, but the final battle awaited them. He proudly added that he was the SS rank Demon Lord, Evil Dragon Lu Yun, known as Illusion. As he approached, he added that only one of them would be able to get out of here alive. They had 10 minutes, and the survivor would receive the title of Overlord along with a reward. However, it was possible that they would both die. Ho, shocked, asked what this meant, implying that they wanted to force them to kill each other. He thought about his future as Yungua's successor, knowing that he couldn't die here. But Leo was much weaker than him. Leo, on the contrary, received the news with hope, rejoicing at another opportunity to die. Ho noticed that Leo looked relaxed, as if he was going to win, and decided that losing was not an option. Leo began to remove his armor to reduce his defenses and suggested that they not delay, since only one would survive. Ho, suspicious, wondered what he was going to do. Want to lure him into a trap? Leo, as if reading his thoughts, told him not to worry. He had no outer space. He was left only in his pants. He said defiantly that the title of the overlord and the reward were right in front of him. He could become the only true overlord in this generation. Ho, suspecting something was wrong, asked about Leo's plan, reminding him that he was already one step away from success. Leo thought to himself with irritation that this guy was winding himself up for nothing. Touching Leo's shoulder, Ho noted that he had gained the trust of the Highness, had gained military strength, and was clearly not weak to be able to defeat an A-rank envoy with simple attacks. He added that if Leo got serious, he would not have a single chance of surviving, and wondered why all this was happening. Leo calmly explained that he was doing this because Yungue could not exist without the Hua family. Hua was a veteran of their state, and he himself was the future of the clan. He is just a nobody, not worthy of even a finger of Ho, and it is he who must die to save the entire race. Suddenly, Ho remembered his mother's words that one day the world would be in his hands, because the power of demons lies in union. He squeezed her hand and let go, mentally addressing his mother and assuring her that he would definitely cope. Ho thought that Leo was willing to sacrifice his life for the sake of the demon clan. Perhaps this was some kind of clever strategy to lure him into a trap. But he himself needed this title, while Leo seemed to think only about saving the race. The dragon reminded them that there were 8 minutes left before the punishment. If they continued to do nothing, he would kill them both. Leo angrily shouted at Ho to hurry up and mentally chided him for his delay. Ho suddenly said that the demons said that if they didn't kill each other in 10 minutes, they would both die. Leo calmly replied, "Yes, so what?" Ho finally said that he wanted to try something and began to accumulate a huge amount of energy within himself. Accumulating powerful energy within himself, he suddenly directed an explosive force at the dragon, shouting out a command for a flower explosion. However, the attack left no trace on the dragon. The dragon became angry and, seething with rage, wondered how Ho dared to attack him. Leo, having assumed his highest form, proposed to join forces and kill the overlord together. The dragon laughed and declared that they did not have enough strength to defeat him. Ho defiantly replied that he now had enough strength. The system confirmed that he had increased his strength and speed characteristics. Pushing off the ground with incredible force, Ho headed straight for the dragon. Leo, watching this, noted not without sarcasm that it looked decent. But in his heart, he thought irritably why they liked to complicate things so much. As Ho approached the dragon, he activated his flower technique without hesitation, releasing a bright stream of energy. However, the attack did not leave the slightest scratch on the dragon. In response, it roared furiously, releasing a destructive dragon roar that made the earth shake. Ho barely managed to dodge by using teleportation and instantly appeared next to the dragon's head. With a powerful swing of the blade, he delivered a crushing blow, aiming straight at the monster's skull. Using his ability, Ho pushed off the dragon's body, quickly picked up speed, and, like lightning, rushed into the attack again. The dragon shot a blinding blue flame straight from its eyes, and the heat from it instantly covered the surrounding area. But Ho managed to react and dodge the attack with lightning speed. In the blink of an eye, he made several quick maneuvers and made many swift cuts on the dragon's body. However, now the demon focused all its attention on Ho, choosing him as its main target. The dragon used his ability to create zero visibility, and at that moment, Ho instantly sensed danger from his right side. However, Ho didn't have time to react in time, and the dragon, with a furious swing of its tail, threw him aside, causing him to lose his balance. Leo, watching what was happening, suddenly thought that if Ho died, he would receive the title of Overlord. The dragon immediately released another cloud impact attack, aiming it straight at Ho. However, Leo reacted instantly, standing in front of Ho and covering him with his back, preparing to take the blow himself. The attack had taken more than half of his strength, and he was coughing up blood, so weak that he could barely move his limbs. Ho, with deep concern and confusion, thought, damn, he's really helping him. Taking out a recovery potion that restored 10,000 units of health, Ho quickly threw it to Leo, and then, without hesitation, another one. The system immediately notified about the increase in life points and restoration of energy, confirming the effectiveness of the potion. Leo began to protest, but Ho, ignoring his words, continued throwing potions at him without stopping. Leo, shocked by what was happening, froze, and the system continued to report an increase in characteristics, restoration of strength and defense. After drinking a potion that increases strength for 1 minute, Ho confidently said, "Let's continue the battle." Leo dropped to his knees, holding back tears, and, barely containing his emotions, said that he was very grateful to him. Having regained his strength, Ho soared into the air with a powerful push, heading headlong into battle. The dragon, already familiar with his techniques, released a powerful beam that quickly pursued Ho, not allowing him to dodge. Ho tried to use teleportation, but the beam still caught up with him, dealing a powerful blow. Immobilized, he fell heavily to the ground, unable to resist. Leo reacted instantly again, stood in front of Ho, and took the entire attack on himself, protecting him with his life. Leo's strength was fading more and more with each passing second, but suddenly it began to grow, filling with a new, unknown energy. He turned around with obvious irritation and shouted that maybe it was enough to treat him. Ho, satisfied with the result, pointed at him with a slight smile, emphasizing his help. And so, Huojuan and Gon Leo continued to fight against the demon until the demon's health dropped to half. They were quite tired, and Ho said, "Let's continue like this. They will definitely defeat the demon." But since the demon lord lost half of his health, he entered a new phase. SSS rank skill, its reverse absorption, health restored by 100,000 points. Ho indignantly asked what kind of skill this was. He restored 100,000 health points. Even if they continue to beat him, he will restore his health. The dragon, having fully recovered, said with contempt, "Pitiful weaklings. They shouldn't have started this." Lu Yun let out a murderous dragon roar that reverberated with a deafening sound and dealt a devastating blow. The dragon added with a grin that no amount of courage would be able to stand in the face of absolute power. The system notified that they had been exposed to poison, which resulted in a decrease in strength, and a new effect was activated, the defense of which was significantly weakened. This blow gradually weakened them, and soon they were so exhausted that they fell to the ground without strength. The system notified that they were on the brink of life and death, and a second strike could be fatal for them. Ho, breathing heavily and speaking with difficulty, wheezed that all the potions were gone. The dragon concentrated all his crushing power and declared that this would be the final blow. Ho, standing with difficulty on his feet and feeling his strength leaving him, quietly said that they had lost. Leo happily said that no, they hadn't lost yet. Only 10 minutes. If he died, Ho could still complete the task. He added that despite their defeat, Ho would still be able to obtain the title of Demon Lord if he survived. With a pained expression on his face and despair in his eyes, Ho asked what exactly this was all supposed to mean. Leo, having made his final decision, quickly grabbed Ho and threw him aside, sacrificing himself. Saving his life, Leo, with difficulty pronouncing the words, told Ho to live as the hope of all demons. At that moment, a bright beam fell on Leo. Ho, watching this, realized that despite his belonging to the demon clan, he could not hate Leo. With despair and unimaginable sadness in his voice, he exclaimed, "No, gone Leo." Suddenly, as if by magic, a powerful stream of golden light tore through the darkness, enveloping Ho. The dragon laughed and said, "Victory. Ho has passed the test. The ancestor of the past will reward him generously." Ho received the title of Brave Demon Lord. The dragon said that his friend was willing to give his own life to protect him. The system reported that Hua had gained 2 million experience points and had risen to level 4. A rank was now available and his stats had increased by 700%, and he had acquired the level 5 skill Demon Lord. The dragon added that for 200 years there had been no one who wanted to protect their comrade. The smoke gradually disappeared, revealing a silhouette. The dragon continued that this was wrong. That's why he gives the title to both of them. It's a kind of faith in both of them. Leo survived and was given the title of the Brave Demon Lord. The dragon said that it was because they had all the necessary qualities. The system reported that 5 million experience points were received, the 10th level and a rank were reached. All characteristics were increased by 700%. 100 points were awarded. The skill of reverse absorption was received, restoring 100,000 health. The system congratulated him for passing the test of the ancestors and receiving the new title of Demon Lord. The next day, the general, shocked and in disbelief, asked how this was possible. Chong was surprised to note that no one had managed to achieve this in hundreds of years. Liu, shocked, asked if Hua had really passed the test of the ancestors. Chong happily declared that the prophecy was coming true and they would be able to see the Demon Lord who would unite the entire clan. Liu recalled in amazement that the last overlord was Liu Yun's ancestor. Lao Te, looking thoughtfully to the side, noticed that such a ruler is born quite rarely in the world. He radiates a special energy, different from ordinary rulers. And after a while, he will become a being that the whole world will admire. The general confidently said that his son received this title. It goes without saying that he received this title, and it could not have been otherwise. Lao smiled happily and said, "Oh, sorry, but it wasn't Wu Juan who became the ruler, but Gan Leo." This news shocked everyone, and they asked again if Gan Leo had really become the overlord. At the same time, the ruler was very worried. Leo, being in the bar, said to give a couple more bottles of Oblivion. The girl answered with a smile that he was very powerful. Taking the bottle and leaving the bar, he muttered discontentedly about how he would manage to die with such a high level of health. The system notified him of the appearance of 2 new skills. Leo, wiping away tears, said that now he definitely won't be able to return home, remembering his beloved. He walked drunk through a crowded courtyard where they sold everything your heart desires, from bright fabrics to exotic fruits and food. But suddenly he felt someone's gaze on him and turned around abruptly. Looking around, he did not notice anything suspicious, only shadows flickering among the crowd. Not paying any attention to this, Leo continued on his way, not paying the slightest attention to the fleeting sensation of someone else's gaze. Meanwhile, the little boy Tian Xiao, hiding around the corner, was about to come out to start spying on him again, but Leo suddenly appeared in front of him. His eyes flashed, and he angrily shouted, "Are you spying on me?" Little Tian Xiao, trying to hold back his tears, quietly said that no, he was not scared, and he was not afraid at all. Leo, frowning, came closer and, more calmly, asked why he was following him. Tian Xiao, sensing that Leo's anger had turned into curiosity, hesitantly handed over a piece of paper and said that he wanted to ask him to accompany him to the life preserver. He was sure that only he could do that. Suddenly, an old man joined him and became very curious to know what was written on the paper. Leo, looking at the paper, saw an invitation to a life buoy where 3 wishes could be fulfilled. Assured that their dreams could be realized. Surprised, he asked where this place was. The kid said that when he received the letter, he immediately ran to find out, but he was told that he was still too small, so it was impossible. Then he saw that he was leaving the bar, and then he decided to ask Leo for help. The old man shouted furiously that he didn't think it was all a sham. Who would believe such letters? However, Leo, ignoring his words, decided that it was true and asked that he could really fulfill his wish. The old man asked in shock, so he believed it? Leo said that he had heard before that the demon clan had a so-called wish fountain that could grant wishes, but he didn't expect it to appear right in front of him. The kid took him by the hands and said that he got this opportunity after passing many tests and paying a membership fee of 50,000 coins. Leo happily noted that then it was definitely true. The old man exclaimed, pointing his finger angrily in his direction, that this was all a clear deception. Leo, completely ignoring his words, said that he was a very lucky boy. The kid laughed and said that he thought so too. The old man asked indignantly what was wrong with him. Was it worth it? Was it really so easy to cheat little kids out of money? Then he should think about changing his profession. The kid explained that this was actually his last chance to have his wishes come true, since he had given away the last money he had earned. His mother had heart failure and only a month to live. He needed to cure her as soon as possible. The old man said that although he was very touched by this story, it still seemed too strange. Leo happily said that he would go with him, but he had to fulfill his wish too. He thought to himself that he just wanted to transform into a human. That's all. How smart he was. The kid said that he could give at least 2. Leo happily said that he was so good. The kid, looking down, said that he wanted his mother to get well. That was all he needed. The old man noticed that they quickly became friends. Leo, smiling touchingly, said that he was so caring and that she shouldn't worry. It would definitely make Mom feel better. He suggested that the baby call him brother, and he, blushing embarrassedly, thanked him. Suddenly the old man, as if remembering something, suggested that if the baby is not allowed, the life Bua desire is not a scammer scheme. After a while they reached the iron doors, and Leo exclaimed, "It's here. The fountain of wishes is here." Leo put the paper to the peephole, and the door began to open with a bang. The kid cried out happily that the door was opening, and Leo only quietly uttered a surprised sigh. But they didn't know that they were trapped. The man, watching them, happily said, "New bait." Then, smiling, he ordered the doors to be closed, and with a predatory grin, he added that remember, do not leave them alive. The doors suddenly began to descend, gradually blocking the exit, creating a tense atmosphere. While Leo and the baby looked at the door in confusion, a man appeared behind them, ready to attack. He concentrated his strength in his hand and lunged forward. The boy turned around and shouted at Leo to be careful. Leo didn't have time to react in time, and the man hit him with a powerful blow. But because of the passive skill, he recovered quickly. Leo said, "Hi." They came at the right time, right? The demon, watching him, mentally noted that Leo was taking the blows with an unperturbed look like a real pretender. For demons with weapons stood before them. Leo declared that they had come to grant wishes. He raised his eyebrows in bewilderment and, looking around, asked if they had really come to the wrong place. The demon laughed and said that he was a real storyteller and the bugs, could not understand anything. He advised them not to even strain their brains because they would not be able to fulfill their wishes. Leo immediately became angry and exclaimed that this was nonsense and demanded that they show the fountain of wishes. The other demons laughed too. One of them said that the fountain of wishes was just a fairy tale for children and asked if Leo really believed it. The demon explained that they were in the territory of the largest black market in Yunhua. He said that they had lured them here on purpose. If they obey, then so be it. They will allow them to stay and serve them for the rest of their lives. And if they don't listen, they will be sold for organs. The demon added that in any case, their lives are worth nothing and no one will lose them. He said that despite their skinny bodies, he thought they could make something worthwhile. The demon patted Leo on the shoulder with a grin and, in a slightly mocking tone, suggested that he obey. But the next second, Leo hit him with his hand with such force that he flew to the side. The other demons stood in shock, not understanding what had just happened, and could not believe what had happened. Leo clenched his fist and said angrily that this was happening over and over again, and he had been frustrated ever since he woke up. The demons came to their senses, and one of them shouted in rage that this guy dared to attack their leader. He gave the command to go into combat mode, and immediately all the equipment rushed towards them. The next moment, they were fully dressed in combat gear, B-rank equipment. The demon, preparing to attack, grinned and said that he would show him their cruelty. Let him try to cope with the armor of the B-rank. He commanded forward, and all the demons entered the battle. The demons began the fight, but Leo, under the influence of 2 liters of liquor, became emotional. Clenching his fist, he said with annoyance that every time he was so close to success, but still failed. Leo added that he felt so bad and disgusted. The system notified that because of the drink, his immunity to attacks increased. He shouted that all this was making him angry, and, waving his hand, created a huge, powerful wave that destroyed everything in its path. This blow was so devastating that even their B-rank equipment couldn't withstand it and was destroyed. Leo, remembering all his failed attempts to die, could not hold back his tears and cried bitterly. The demon, kneeling, asked with sincere despair who he was. He asked for forgiveness and begged to let him go. The kid said with joy in his voice that his brother was incredibly strong. But, sobbing, Leo exclaimed that all this was very annoying. The demon, whose tears never stopped flowing, explained apologetically that they had been forced to do so, since no one had asked them. The power behind their organization was colossal, and they could not simply run away. Leo suddenly sobered up and asked with interest if the power was really that great. The demon he was still trampling on said with fury that he was no longer destined to survive. He added that there were very powerful people behind them, and Leo should be prepared for the general to definitely show up. Leo thought about how there were only 3 people working on this plan originally. He wondered if he would be able to die after all. Suddenly the doors began to open, and the demon, with joy in his voice, announced that here was the general. He would soon die. The general entered the room and angrily asked what they were doing there. Leo, recognizing him as Jiang Duo Chao, exclaimed in surprise that this was indeed the man. The demon standing next to the general angrily asked how Leo knew their boss and how he dared to talk to him like that. Turning out to be Jiang Duoko's younger brother, he snapped his fingers and said that it was just a pitiful bug. The demons, begging for mercy and fear, claimed that it was not they who had spoken these words, apologized for everything, and begged the general to let them go. The next second, their heads were crushed with one light snap of the fingers. The little boy, overcome with terror, exclaimed that the situation had become truly dangerous. The general proudly declared that these worthless people were useless scum, not worthy of his attention. The demon thought, try with interest to understand who this guy really was. The general, with a contemptuous expression on his face, said that Leo knew too much and therefore he was destined to die here. Leo, with a challenge in his eyes, said that Chubby seemed strong and challenged him to kill him if he was so confident in his power. He happily added that he was giving him a full 10 minutes to finish with him. The next second his face changed, and angrily, gritting his teeth, he said that if the general couldn't cope, then he shouldn't blame him for the consequences. All 3 of them froze, shocked by his words, unable to believe what they had just heard. The general, thoughtfully scratching the back of his head, asked what 10 minutes meant. He concentrated all his power into his hand and asked with fury in his voice how Leo dared to humiliate him. Jiang Doupan instantly appeared next to Leo, delivering powerful blows, and told him to catch 5 of his blows. Leo couldn't withstand the pressure and flew back. Jiang Doupan caught up with him, continued the attack, and added that he received 8 more blows. His comrade turned pale, breaking out in a cold sweat as he remembered who Leo was. Jiang Doupan, out of breath from the blows, said irritably that he was damn tired. The system reported that the reverse recovery had returned all the life points. Leo disappointedly told Jiang Doupan not to stop. Enraged, Jiang Doupan concentrated all his destructive power into his hand and unleashed an enhanced version of the strongest strike. The system notified about the activation of a passive skill, where after receiving 15 blows, recovery occurs, and all blows inflicted are reflected on the enemy. As a result, Jiang Doupan received a powerful deflected blow, bled profusely, and retreated further. Not understanding what was happening, he angrily demanded to know what was wrong with Leo. His comrade exclaimed in horror that he remembered the very same man who became the second general. Didn't he go to his ancestor? Then why is he still alive? Jiang Doupan wiped away his blood and said that everything was clear now. But if everyone cares about him, he shouldn't think that he's the coolest. He's just a low-level demon who relies on a girl. And he, Jiang Dopan, is a top-A ranked demon with 3 hearts and the future of the entire demon clan. In an instant, his body was enveloped in blue flames, which turned into A-rank ice armor. Leo, lying on the ground, with a sparkle in his eyes and inspiration, shouted at him to continue. Jiang Dopan, enraged, gathered enormous strength in his fist and punched the ground. A stream of powerful energy split the ground and caused a huge explosion. But gradually, all of Jiang Dopan's armor began to crack and crumble, falling apart. The system once again reported the activation of a passive skill, where after 15 hits, recovery occurs, and all hits are reflected. The powerful force released by Jiang returned to him, causing colossal damage. Bleeding out, he lost his defenses, and the system warned him that death awaited him. His comrade, not believing his eyes, in despair and with tears in his voice, the general cried out. Jiang Dopan fell to his knees, completely immobilized and exhausted of his last strength. The system reported that he had 10 seconds left until death. Completely wounded, he muttered in bewilderment that this could not be, not understanding why everything had happened like this. The general looked in horror at Leo, who rose with ease and coldly said that the 10 minutes were up. He then asked angrily why, despite everything, he still had so much energy. Leo flexes his hands and asks, disappointed, if that's really all. The general answers with trepidation that he has nothing more. He has given everything and asks forgiveness for letting him down. He begged him not to beat him with a pleading voice and promised to give him everything he wanted: money, fame, influence. Leo, filled with rage, rushed forward, declaring that he wanted him to kill him. The general, with tears on his face, desperately begged him not to do this, repeating that he did not want to and asking who he was anyway. Leo was already swinging his armed strike, but suddenly the doors swung open and the person who entered loudly called out to the general. The demon pointed at him with a pleading voice, reminding him that this was his brother. Chong Ducao coldly replied that he was to blame for his own death, and added that the final word was with General Gon, since he had no right to decide anything. Chong reports that this is a military factory that produces weapons. The kid, looking at him with admiration, exclaims that his brother is simply incredible. Chong continued, explaining that this misunderstanding was due to poor leadership, and asked General Gon to allow him to fix it. Leo stops him, stating that he is not interested in such unimportant information. As he leaves, he grumbles about how there are only useless scum around and none of them are truly strong. The general bows his head to the ground as Leo approaches and pitifully begs for mercy. Suddenly he froze and added that, by the way, there was one more thing. Puffy declared that he would give him everything he wanted. Coming closer, he quietly asked if he hadn't said that he had several hearts. The general, pale with fear, squeaked that he had said nothing of the sort, and in a panic asked what he meant and why he was frightening him. An hour later, the general found himself in the operating room, where, mad with fear, he screamed, begging for help. He was strapped tightly and tears were streaming down his face as he cried out in despair, admitting his mistake and begging to be released. The doctor calmly prepares the instruments, assuring that a person can survive with only one heart. The general cried out piteously, begging him to stop. At this time, the kid, clasping Leo's leg, asked hopefully if it was true that his mother would recover now. Leo, softening a little, answered that he hoped it would help her. He quietly thought that it was a pity that his own wish would remain unfulfilled. Leo wondered if her dear was okay. Meanwhile, Chong asked that he hadn't found the energy storage device, right? The demon calmly replied that there was no need to worry, the demonic element was fine. Chong said seriously, "This is Yungua's most powerful energy weapon, and it must be protected. No one is allowed to take it away." Then, feeling that something terrible was approaching, he said that it seemed as if an army of people were approaching. Then, feeling the approach of something terrible, He added that it seemed that an army of people was already close. In another part of the world, a man, gathering a huge army, gave a strict order to line up in battle formation. In the castle, Princess Hao said that Xiao Feng should have led this battle. Stroking his body, she added sadly that now there was only his body here. When would he feel better? Then Hao confidently assured that there was very little time left. They would meet very soon. Meanwhile, the three demons, drawing their blades, rushed forward to attack, shouting furiously. They struck Leo with their blades, but he instantly recovered and, with irritation, shouted, "Well, come on, attack." The demons are shocked by his power. Leo, holding his head in anger, curses fate, wondering why no one can kill him. But it turned out to be a dream, and he suddenly woke up. Holding his head, he irritably said the dream again. Mel enters the room, bows and announces that a meeting will be held soon, asking him to prepare. Leo, frowning in confusion, repeated with bewilderment, "Meeting?" An hour later, everyone took their seats, and Lu began to say that according to the scouts' report, there had been some changes in the leadership of the Human Legion. She added that it looked like they were preparing an attack on their army. This time, humanity sent a legion of over 10,000 soldiers. Lu explained that this was why she had called all the important people of Yunghua to discuss strategy. General Ho said the last time such a large-scale battle was fought was 10 years ago. The entire country was mobilized, but even then they barely repelled the attack. He folded his arms and said that in the end they had to resort to some pretty sneaky and underhanded methods to stay safe and sound. He then noted that in those days the human army consisted of only 5,000 people. Nowadays they have not improved their strength much, but the human army has increased significantly. He suggested that they mobilize their fighters. Wu Juan would lead the vanguard. His son, without hesitation, immediately replied yes. Lu, without wasting time, asked General Gon what he thought about it. Leo, having done the calculations, thought that if 1,000 people attacked him within a minute, then on average they would inflict more than 100 units of damage per second. He then realized that the total damage would then exceed his blood volume. In other words, if they kept hurting him, he would die. Having made his decision, Leo said with a smile that this was a great opportunity that could not be missed. He slammed the table and said firmly that this was war and they would fight. They needed a hard fight. General Ho also slammed the table and said with displeasure that Yunghua might die because of him, and there was no point in listening to his nonsense. Leo began his inspiring speech by reminding them that 10 years ago they had managed to repel an attack by 5,000 men. But now an army of 10,000 was moving towards them. Even they would not be able to defeat them unless they called for reinforcements. He confidently stated that in 10 years they would be attacked by an army of 20,000 men. And the question was who they would trust with their lives at that moment. Leo challenged, didn't they want to become more majestic, and who said that demons didn't improve their power? Then, pointing proudly to himself, he continued that they must have forgotten who he was. He was the one who made them stronger. Princess Lu, completely captivated by his words and determination, said Gon quietly. Others present began to say that he was the first to pass the ancestors' test. The demon confirmed, how could they forget about it? Another demon added that the prophecy of the demon clan would come true, and the demon lord would unite the entire race, and the demons would finally see the light. General Ho shouted furiously that he was going to put the lives of tens of millions of soldiers on the line. He added that many had never been on a battlefield and did not know the brutality behind the fighting. Leo calmly asked if they thought they could win with this attitude. Do they think if they gave up now, would they have any hope for a brighter future? He angrily asked if they thought that they could win with just words. He reminded them that they had been soldiers for so many years. Didn't they understand anything? Leo, raising his voice with enthusiasm, shouted that now was the most important moment in their lives. Then he declared with determination that they must win, and if anyone was against it, let him behead him and put him on display. Everyone was stunned by such a speech, but among them there were those who were dissatisfied and did not share his confidence. Wu Juan inspired by his speech, remarked that this guy was so determined. Lu stood up confidently, placing her hands on the table, and firmly stated that she now understood everything. She confidently stated that General Gon would be the leader of this battle. Everyone should obey his orders. Then, looking around at everyone present, she said in a commanding tone, "Let's begin, forward." The next day, General Ho said that he had been fighting for many years, but he wanted to point out that this time the enemy army was colossal. The strength of each warrior was several times greater than theirs. He doubted that they had any chance of winning. He continued that the other leaders had been working with him for a long time, and he was the one responsible for their lives. General Ho loudly gave the order that they did not have to go into the city, and they did not have to listen to General Gon's orders either. Then, clenching his fist, he said that Her Highness must understand that she should not have left him out. A few days ago, the human army infiltrated Yunhua. The 21st Squad of the human army arrived instead of attacking the demons, preparing their weapons. The man, looking intently through binoculars, confidently said that they were finished. He gave the command to prepare and with cruel determination said, "Listen to the order. All demons must die." At that very second, several powerful projectiles were already flying towards the demons. All the demons were preparing to attack back, concentrating all their spells. One of them shouted that they were attacking. But the resistance proved too weak, and they were swept away by the waves of this enormous force. The demon rose and tried to destroy the remaining shells, but did not notice the shell flying towards him. This explosion not only destroyed the barrier, but also took the lives of many demons, leaving behind only destruction and death. Leo, seeing this explosion and feeling the power, smiled and said, "Finally, through the smoke from the explosion, many human technologies began to appear. The entire army and machines approached the second wall, preparing for another fight." General Ho looked around the army and quietly but confidently reminded them, "Remember what he said." They started talking, and one asked what to do. They couldn't disobey General Ho's order. The other one replied that he didn't know himself. He wasn't the one giving the main orders. Leo turned around and shouted confidently, "Listen to the order. Stay here, and he will do everything himself." No one expected to hear such an order, and so they simply froze, not believing what was happening. Leo loudly announced, "Let's begin." His words sounded with complete confidence. He added that they must trust the master. Without saying a word, Leo jumped off the wall, landing right next to the people. They all instantly tensed up, drawing their weapons and preparing their ammo trucks, waiting for the next move. The atmosphere became tense, preparing for the decisive battle. All guns were aimed at Leo. Blue Union Mage Lu Renzi wondered what was wrong with this demon. He went down alone. Looking up, he noticed that everyone else was just standing there. Lu thought it was strange, and he wondered, is this a trap? The demons, still stunned, said what was going on. One of them replied that he had told them to just rely on him. General Ho thought angrily, the sick man, he must have gone crazy. What is he planning? Leo can't handle it alone. Looking at the battlefield, he knew that the enemy had an army of 10,000 men. Leo, with a smug smile on his face, remarked that he had heard about the incredible strength of their army. He began to undress slowly, deliberately lowering his defense and speed. Leo, with a challenging look, asked why they did not approach him. Were they afraid? Lu, watching what was happening, wondered to himself, was he really alone? They held each other's gaze, each absorbed in their own thoughts, trying to understand the other's intentions. Leo, recognizing him, thought that Lu Rengia was once his subordinate. He never thought that he would ever become the leader of the army. "Well, don't let me down," flashed through his mind as the plan was hatched. Smiling, he thought that he was the bravest of them all. It was time to step up. Slapping his ass with a smirk, he said, "Idiots, go ahead and try attacking." Lu Rengia, overcome with rage, screamed, "Damn bastard! How dare he show his ass!" Raising his sword high into the air, Lu Rengia gave the command with fury in his voice, forward towards him. And his army, following his command, rushed into the attack, ready for a decisive battle. Leo, pleased that everything was going according to plan, thought to himself, "Yes, attack, do some damage." His squad brought their cannons into the fight as people tried to get closer to him and kill him. Lu Renjia quickly closed the distance, aimed at the head, and made a cut with incredible precision. Then his squad came running, surrounding Leo and attacking from all sides, swords whistling through the air. Leo, having instantly recovered from the blows, calmly consoled himself with the thought that he only needed to wait a little while until his defense finally collapsed. This was not enough. His defense exceeded 1,000 units, and even coordinated strikes did not bring the desired result. Leo could not stand it and, shouting in irritation, demanded that they give it their all. The squad froze, wondering why he looked like he wanted to be defeated. Another asked, did their attacks have no effect on him? Lu Renjia, realizing that their attacks were useless, said with surprise and anger, "Damn, he has such a powerful recovery power." He quickly relayed the information to the others through the earpiece, and, without wasting any time, ordered the second squad to enter the battle. The second detachment, having received the signal to act, immediately took up positions and carefully aimed at the target. Having chosen the exact angle for the shot, the machine immediately built up power and fired, hitting the target exactly. Leo, with a smile on his lips, just stood there, taking the brunt of it, and happily said yes, just like that. General Ho, amazed by Leo's incredible endurance, thought darkly, what the hell with his recovery power? He wondered if he was serious, since the battle had just begun and he was already ready to fight the human army alone. The squad continued to strike repeatedly, trying to kill him, and Leo laughed, urging them to continue attacking. Lu, not understanding what he was trying to achieve, began to wonder if there were any countermeasures. When Leo's life bar decreased a little, he happily noted, "Here's the blood, continue." However, at that moment, his passive skill was activated. After receiving a series of hits, the skill started a recovery and reflected all attacks back, instantly knocking enemies aside and killing them. The soldiers, looking at the dead bodies of their comrades, asked with horror and fear in their voices what had happened, not understanding how their attacks could have been so useless. The wounded man, speaking with difficulty, croaked that this guy was definitely not an ordinary demon. His resistance power was too strong. After these words, he bled to death. His comrades, watching what was happening, noted with sadness and heavy hearts that Aben was dead. Lu Renjia, realizing the seriousness of the situation, realized that they were in serious trouble. He recognized that this demon was incredibly strong and would be extremely difficult to defeat. Having made a difficult decision, he gave the order to stop the attack. Lu recalled General Xian's words, saying that among the demons, there appeared a rank S, a true master with the ability to recover. He added that this demon, relying on its own strength, independently broke through many worlds and came to them, allowing demons to gain power that they did not have before. The main question for Lu was why Leo was still alive despite all the attacks, and who he really was. Leo, having fully recovered, asked why they stopped because there were more than 10,000 of them. Why didn't they kill him? The soldiers, noticing that Leo had no scratches, asked in amazement how the wounds on his body could have healed so quickly. Another soldier added that there was definitely something wrong with him. Lu informed the other squads that the demon they had encountered was much stronger than they had expected, and told everyone to remain calm and not attack. Then, smiling, Leo added that their task was to attract the most powerful demons, and they accomplished it. As he moved away from Leo, Lu Renjia gave the order to retreat, adding that they did not need any losses. The entire army immediately began to retreat. The demons, noticing their retreat, were outraged. Mei firmly pointed to their retreat and, riding a dragon, called everyone to follow her, commanding them not to let the enemy escape. Following her order, the demons mounted their dragons and rushed in pursuit. Wu Juan, seeing that the first detachment had begun the attack, decisively gave the order to his army to advance. The people, hearing the noise behind them, immediately turn around and were shocked to see the demons starting to advance towards them with fury. Lu Renzi, surprised, shouted out what this meant. Why did they attack so suddenly? Then it dawned on him that he had let the entire army go, and now they were left defenseless. This realization shook him, and he knew that their end was near. The demons, sensing their fear, screamed in rage and rushed forward, ready to tear their enemies to pieces. General Ho smiled and thought that General Gon Leo wasn't so bad. Today's youth are quite cunning, which is not a bad thing. Having taken the highest state, he shouted, "Listen to the order." From this moment on, everyone obeys the order of General Ganya. Ho, clenching his fists furiously, shouted that the ant army must be defeated at any cost. His voice sounded like an order, full of determination and hatred for the enemy. His army immediately shouted that they obeyed, and as one, rushed to the battlefield, ready to carry out the order and fight to the last. But suddenly a soldier appeared and reported that bad things were happening. The human army had set a trap. The siege army was just a cover for the real one. From the western side, the human army had already passed through the gate. Unable to bear it any longer, he said with tears in his eyes that all the generals who were on duty there had been beheaded. The people of Yinghua are suffering from a massacre. Their real troops are attacking the capital from all sides. The demons are finished. General Ho, with pain and surprise in his heart, quietly said that this was impossible. He could not believe that the situation had come to this. Meanwhile, Jiang Doupan's head was mercilessly torn off, and the man holding it in his hands laughed, calling the demons useless. Princess Lu, already heavily injured after the fierce battle, barely managed to say that this man was indeed incredibly strong. Wei Ming, who was also seriously injured, said with pain in his voice that the demons should evacuate immediately. The man sitting on the body of the dead demon said with a grin that their defense forces were completely defeated and that it would soon be time for the game. At that moment, help arrived, suddenly attacking with a powerful explosion. The explosive blow shook the air, causing the enemies to freeze for a moment. One soldier was mortally wounded, and his comrade, in a panic, said urgently that he needed medicine or he would not survive. Another anxiously wondered if the demons had returned. General Ho's hatred was unbearable as he furiously declared that the true rival had finally appeared. The man grinned and said that a truly powerful demon had finally arrived. Getting to his feet, he laughed and remarked that he had been sitting too long. His words were full of self-satisfaction. General Hua immediately felt a purple glow coming from him. He was much more powerful than other people. Without wasting a second, he decided to speed up. Having made a quick decision, he concentrated, feeling how energy filled his body. He transformed into a dragon. His body began to change, growing in size, and his strength and speed increased dramatically. His eyes lit up with a bright fire, and the power emanating from him made the air vibrate. A few minutes ago, a fierce battle between humans and demons was unfolding at the southern gate of Yinghua. Leo, returning to the city walls, handed over command to his squad, calmly stating that it was time to play a little. In a disappointed voice, he muttered that after his soul had moved into this body, some abilities had started to activate, and despite his desire to commit suicide, death had eluded him every time. Then he suddenly burst out laughing, turning into hysterical laughter, and tears glistened in his eyes. He added with annoyance that even having become a demon lord, it was still not enough. Suddenly, a huge pillar of fire fell from the sky, destroying one of the city's main buildings with a roar. Leo froze, not believing his eyes, and looked around the destroyed streets in a daze. He saw many dead, and with pain in his soul, he wondered if they were not supposed to fight outside the city. A thought flashed through his mind when the enemies had time to enter. His thoughts were interrupted by a plaintive cry. "I beg you, let my daughter go. He will give everything back." Leo turned around instantly and saw one of the people stomping on the demon's head, saying that he didn't need anything. Another man was standing next to him, clutching a little girl in his arms, who was crying and calling for her father. His friend grabbed the girl roughly and, laughing, promised that they would have more fun. The child's father, through the pain, desperately stretched out his hand forward, begging to let her go. His voice trembled with fear and pain. But suddenly a piercing flash of pain shot through his arm. He felt sharp steel digging into his flesh, and a loud scream escaped his chest. The man mockingly stated that in the world there is always one who wins and another who loses. However, he didn't have time to finish speaking, as he suddenly received a powerful blow to the face and flew back several meters. Leo looked at them with fury in his eyes, feeling that his patience was running out. In his head, there was a thought that this would not work. The man, still holding the girl, chuckled and called him another suicide bomber who had come to die. They quickly tied the girl's hands, and then, taking out their weapons, rushed at Leo, speaking after him. Leo calmly noted to himself that even in a fierce battle, the Lord could not lose, and therefore the army of people was in flight. With one powerful blow, he sent them both flying, instantly reducing their health to a minimum, rendering their weapons completely useless. Squeezing one of the attacker's throat with a steel grip, Leo increased the pressure with a cold expression on his face. The man was inwardly horrified, realizing that just one blow had practically deprived them of any chance of survival. Looking into Leo's inhuman eyes, he began to suspect that what he was seeing was not a system error. Leo, increasing the pressure on his throat, gave the order to say what formation they were from. The man, frightened, immediately answered that they were from the 21st Detachment of the 511th Formation. His comrade, barely catching his breath, wondered why Leo needed the formation number. Hearing the answer, Leo suddenly loosened his grip and, repeating the squad number, fell into a state of shock. The thought flashed through his head. Could this really be the same detachment in which he was once the commander? Suspicions that something was wrong began to grow, and he continued to wonder what was going on here. Meanwhile, the people, having realized the danger, began to retreat, shouting to each other to run faster. One of them noticed with fear that Leo was somehow strange. Leo, lost in his thoughts, realized that something inexplicable was happening around him. The anxious feeling of uneasiness grew stronger with each passing second. Looking around, Leo felt a growing sense of déjà vu creep into his mind. The streets, the buildings, even the air seemed strangely familiar, as if he had been in this place a long time ago. Suddenly, the realization flashed in his mind that the demon city of Yunghua was in front of him. While Leo was coming to his senses, his ears were pierced by the heartbreaking scream of a little girl. Through tears and despair, she screamed loudly that her mother had been tortured to death. Her father stood next to her, hugging his daughter tightly, trying to calm her down. His voice trembled with pain, but he continued to whisper words of comfort, assuring her that everything would be fine because she still had him, her dad. Leo suddenly felt a surge of powerful energy that literally shook the air around him. He raised his head and was amazed to see in the sky the gigantic figure of a mighty dragon. The creature looked terrifying in appearance, and Leo immediately assumed that it was the demonic dragon Huan. A subtle shudder ran through his body as forgotten memories began to surface. Instinctively clutching his head, he thought, Yunghua, I think he remembers. Leo recalled the events of 6 years ago, when he led the army heading to Yunghua. Leo fought with a powerful dragon, and then he defeated this demonic dragon. At that time, this victory seemed too easy and was quickly forgotten, leaving no trace in his soul. Now Leo finally realized that he had somehow returned 6 years ago. However, the most important question continued to torment him. Why was he no longer in command of the army, and what happened to his real body? At the same time, Hao Jinga was thinking that the hostility between the races was about to flare up again. However, she noticed that Leo was different from the majority. She reached out and stroked his hair, noting that his war was fought for protection, unlike others who fight for the sake of plunder, power, and tyranny. And this is the most unfortunate thing. Meanwhile, Leo's memories filled his mind more and more. He remembered that the 511th Army had always been famous for its strong principles and strict discipline. This was an elite squad that, even after defeating demons, showed humanity and released prisoners. At this time, the baby, who was being cruelly kicked, clung to the old blade, crying hysterically and begging the enemies to let his mother go. One of the men grabbed the woman by the hair with a grin and, without a trace of regret on his face, declared that he absolutely did not care that she was her mother. The woman, realizing that these were her last moments, only managed to cry out pleadingly to her son to run. However, the man, demonstrating his strength, enveloped her body in bright blue flames, mercilessly burning her before the child's eyes. At this moment, the system reported that the current deputy head of the 511th Squad, Bao Li, known as the assassin from the Blue Union, had previously been detained by Sha Fengliao for violating the rules. Bao Li roughly groped the woman and laughed, saying that for a demon, she looked quite attractive. His impudent behavior and disgusting words caused Leo to feel uncontrollable rage. Leo, quickly analyzing what was happening, suddenly realized the true reason for this chaos. An unquenchable rage began to boil in his soul, and only one thought was spinning in his head. This was unforgivable. 18 long years have passed since the day when the lady gave the world an heir. At that momentous moment, General Ho, his eyes shining with happiness, opened the door and, containing his excitement, loudly demanded that they show him the baby as soon as possible. The soldiers watching their stern commander were amazed. It was the first time they had seen General Ho so excited and joyful. When the baby was handed into his arms, the general seemed to freeze in place, not taking his admiring gaze off him. Smiling, he quietly, but with noticeable warmth in his voice, noted how calm and handsome his son turned out to be. Hugging the child, he firmly promised that he would protect him and all of Yunhua, no matter what it cost him. Currently on the battlefield, Exant, who possessed extraordinary strength, summoned a destructive lightning bolt and sent it straight towards the wing of the enormous dragon. General Ho, seriously wounded and bleeding, shouted fearlessly that he would never let Yunhua fall. However, his opponent only sneered dismissively, arrogantly stating that he was only an A-rank demon and did not pose a serious threat. With a light wave of his blade, he added that it wouldn't take long to deal with him. Pushing off the ground, he instantly gained speed and unleashed a series of crushing blows on the dragon, from which the monster let out a deafening roar. Deep wounds covered its entire body. The enemy, without the slightest pity, again summoned lightning and finally dealt with the weakened creature. Transformed into a human form, General Ho, clutching his wounds, tried with all his might to stop the bleeding. With a heavy heart, he realized that his strength was catastrophically insufficient and the enemy was too powerful. The thought that no one in Yunhua could match this opponent filled his heart with bitterness and anxiety. Meanwhile, his enemy, looking at the general with contempt, said discontentedly that it was still not enough for him. Raising his blade above the exhausted Ho's head, he declared with icy indifference that it was time to die. But before the fatal blow could be dealt, the blade suddenly froze, stopped by outside interference. General Ho, who had already resigned himself to his inevitable death, turned around in surprise and asked what was the matter. When his gaze met the eyes of the young Wu Juan, anger flared up in his chest. He furiously shouted out whether he had gone mad and demanded to know what he was doing here. Wu Juan clenched his fists and confidently replied that he had come here to kill the enemy. However, the general, still writhing in pain, said that he would never allow this to happen, since Wu Juan was not his opponent, just a pitiful bug in his path. Wu Juan couldn't bear it any longer and started screaming, repeating his father's words about him being a pathetic little bug. In despair, he added that he had heard this since childhood and asked if he was really so insignificant in his eyes. 14 years ago, when Wu Juan was still a child, he was once asked who he admired most. With a beaming smile on his face, he answered without hesitation that he admired his father, a mighty general. That same day, having taken first place in the exam, the little boy joyfully ran to his father's office to share his victory. However, instead of the expected approval, he heard only a cold reply that he already knew everything. The kid, disappointed with his answer, quietly left the office with his head down. A couple of years later, Wu Juan proudly told his father again that he had won first place in the assessment. The general just looked at him indifferently and replied that he himself had been the same in his youth. Wu Juan once again felt only coldness and indifference towards him from his father. A few years later, Wu Juan had achieved significant success and was promoted to lieutenant general. Chong noted with admiration that he was the youngest lieutenant general in history. However, the father again ignored this, only briefly saying that he already knew. The disappointment that had been building up in Wu Juan's heart for all these years now spilled out. He bitterly declared that he would never earn his father's approval. Right. Their heated argument attracted the attention of Xian Jibiao, who watched the proceedings with interest. General Ho, gathering his remaining strength, furiously shouted at his son to get away immediately, as the enemy was too strong. But Wu Juan defiantly replied that even if the opponent was the Buddha himself, he didn't care. He firmly said that once the enemy set foot on Yungua's lands, he would not leave here alive. General Ho worried that Wu Juan was just a madman and didn't understand anything. The general was convinced that the human troops were too strong. The men silently formed into battle formation and, on command, prepared to strike from the rear, intending to deal with him quickly and mercilessly. However, their plan did not even have time to come to fruition before the warriors could take any action. They were already cut down. In the blink of an eye, their heads were separated from their bodies, and the headless warriors fell to the ground one after another. Left without cover, Xian felt his armor crack and the blade in his hands suddenly break into two halves. Wei Ming, who was standing nearby, did not hide his amazement loudly, noting that Wu Juan had destroyed their squad with a single blow. Xian, also amazed by such incredible power, immediately realized that this demon was of a completely different level. Wu Juan concentrated all his internal energy, created huge wings of fire matter for himself, and quickly soared into the air. With a slight movement, he began to accumulate an incredible amount of power, preparing to use the demon lord's deadly skill. From his furious energy, the air and the earth around him began to tremble and vibrate. General Hua, feeling the familiar yet terrifying power emanating from his son, quietly said that the process of releasing the demon lord's power had begun. General Ho thought with pride that his son had long since surpassed him. In his mind, he involuntarily returned to the past, to those distant times when Wu Juan was still a child. Many years ago, he watched the boy's progress with genuine joy. After waiting for Wu Juan to leave the classroom, the general glanced at his report card with a warm smile and thought that he expected nothing less from his son, the best of the best. The next day, little Wu Juan came to his father's office again to share his successes. However, the general, who was deep in thought at the time, greeted him coldly, without expressing any emotion. General Huo worriedly reflected on the fact that his father had given him a name that meant not a soldier, and anxiously hoped that nothing would happen to his son. He wondered where Wu Juan's interest in war came from. Later, a demon approached him and reported that Mr. Wu Juan had won first place. The general, rejoicing at his son's success, exclaimed that he had known for a long time. He was the only one like him. However, he noted with sadness that his son's achievements were at odds with his expectations. The demon thought sadly that every time the general learned of Wu Juan's military successes, it only increased his sadness. That evening, General Ho, sitting at his wife's grave, wondered why his son had chosen such a dangerous path. Despite his worries, he still felt proud that his son had once again taken first place, and quietly noted to himself that he had not expected anything less from him. He once promised himself to remain cool and stay away from the army to give his son the opportunity to live in peace. but he sadly asked himself why she left so early. He admitted that he had no idea how to behave with his son. The general always believed that Wu Juan deserved a calm, safe, and happy life away from wars. But now, looking at his son who had embarked on this dangerous path, he sadly admitted how wrong he had been. Returning to the present, the general watched as Wu Juan, who had accumulated a huge amount of energy, suddenly released it, directing the full power of his skill at Excian. The impact was so devastating that the entire space around them began to collapse. Wu Juan released a huge amount of power, destroying everything in his path. But Excian easily repelled Wu Juan's furious attack with just one swing of his blade. His face twisted into a triumphant smile, and his eyes lit up with excitement. A loud laugh echoed across the battlefield as he savored the moment and said that he had long been waiting to meet a worthy opponent. Swinging his sword once more, he challenged Wu Juan to show his full strength and begin the battle for real. General Ho watched his opponent's every move with tension. His gaze lingered on Excian's sword, and a vague memory surfaced in his mind. He remembered once seeing this formidable weapon on an ancient map, where it was marked as a relic of terrifying power. Meanwhile, Wu Juan, sensing the growing threat, instantly strengthened his defense, accepting the challenge with unperturbed confidence. General Hua, realizing that delay could cost his son his life, hurried forward, intending to save Wu Juan, but was too late. Excian concentrated all his strength, gathering a dense energy field around the blade, and delivered a crushing blow, creating a powerful cut. Wu Juan realized at that moment that it was impossible to stop such a blow and that this sword could cut through anything. For a split second, he braced himself for the worst, but the blow only grazed his shoulder, leaving a deep but not fatal wound. However, the building behind him was cut in half. Seeing this crushing blow, Wei Ming panicked and thought that Wu Juan had died and shouted his name in alarm. Lu, shocked by what she saw, covered her mouth in horror. But after a few moments, the smoke began to clear, and Wu Juan's figure appeared from the cloud. General Ho, despite the mortal danger, managed to cover his son with his body in time, taking the brunt of the blow. He regretfully admitted that he had made many mistakes, and finally decided to say what he should have said long ago. Turning to Wu Juan, he said with a proud smile that his son had always been his greatest pride. Wu Juan, barely holding back his sobs from pain and despair, said, "But his hand." With warm confidence in his voice, he added that Wu Juan was the best of soldiers, and one day he would definitely become the greatest demon in history. With an effort, he raised his head and sternly ordered his son to live on. He added that it was no coincidence that Excian's blade had come into his possession. The general guessed that this opponent had managed to defeat an S-rank demon before taking possession of such a powerful weapon. Excian, watching the scene, noted with mockery that blocking the blow to protect his son was pointless. General Ho, with difficulty taking a step forward, firmly said that no one from Yunghua was his opponent. He proudly added that he always made the last move to protect his homeland and for future generations. Wu Juan desperately begged his father to stay alive, but the general had already made his final decision. Concentrating the last of his energy, he used the ancient skill Living Wall. An indestructible wall of fire rose from the hot air in front of him, and the entire area around him was reinforced with an energy shield, increasing the defense of nearby objects. As the general lifted his son into the air, he spoke his last words. He wanted Wu Juan to live in peace and safety, promising to protect him for the rest of his life. Looking at his son with love and pride, the general added that he was ready to protect Yunghua for his sake. Then, without wasting any time, he sternly ordered his men to carry Wu Juan away as quickly as possible so that he would not become a victim of this battle. Wei dragged them away, but Wu Juan, struggling to break free, shouted that he would not leave and would stay with his father until the end. Lu, with a trembling voice and tears in her eyes, quietly said the general's name, unable to contain the pain. Excian, seeing their desperate attempts to escape, laughed loudly and mockingly asked if they really intended to escape. He added with contempt that he had not yet had time to enjoy their complete despair and suffering. But suddenly Senya was stopped by a confident voice that sounded from behind. He said not to kill them so easily. Xin turned around and saw a demon named Chong calmly walking towards them with a mysterious cube in his hands. Chong reported that a group of demons were desperately protecting this artifact. Holding the cube forward, he offered it in exchange for a place on Xion's team, hoping to form a profitable alliance with him. Xion, without lowering his sword, held it near Chong's head and with cold disdain asked whether this cube was an important demonic element and why he should believe his words. Chong, despite the obvious threat to his life, managed to maintain his composure. He began to explain that their clan had been guarding this element for many centuries. He revealed that after the unification of the demon continent under the rule of the first demon king Lu Yun, their ancestor became the ruler's most trusted person. Chong said that throughout the centuries, each demon king always had 3 generals, one in charge of the magical arts, one in charge of governing the country, and the third was a master of military affairs. However, their Jiang clan was an exception, as they were close to the king without any magical powers or military skills. Chong assured that this item was extremely useful and that their clan had been its guardian from the very beginning. Trying to convince Xian of the artifact's value, Chong assured him that only their clan was capable of activating the cube. The thought flashed through Chong's mind that the demonic element was subservient to him. In front of him was an elemental body that could gather the life force and spiritual power of the entire demon race. Every demon requires the work of this element, and creating a new element takes several decades. Xian examined the cube carefully, keeping his eyes on Chong. His voice grew louder as he asked, clearly annoyed, why Chong was so willing to part with the object. His voice rang with rage as he angrily asked if he thought he was an idiot, sending lightning bolts around him. This turn of events made Chong lose all his self-control. He began to tremble, and a strangled sound of fear escaped from his throat. Chong dropped the cube, then fell to his knees and said in a pleading voice that he just wanted to survive. He admitted his weakness, adding that he had no combat ability in military affairs. If he remained with the demonic element, his death was inevitable. Chong's voice trembled as he explained that his clan had never been popular among the demons, and although their representatives were formally included in the generals, in reality, they always remained in last place. Lu, unable to bear what was happening, burst into tears and screamed with pain in her voice that Chong had gone crazy. She reminded them that Xian had killed their comrades and friends. Pointing to a dead body nearby, she said that Xian had killed their friends in cold blood and even taken the life of Chong's younger brother with his own hands. Xian, hearing her words, turned around with interest. His attention was drawn to the body of the slain demon. Coming closer, he calmly kicked the severed head of Brother Chong and mockingly asked if this fat man was really his relative. He looked at Chong with disdain and indifferently threw his head at his feet. Chong mockingly remarked that he deserved his fate, asking rhetorically who asked him to fight. Ching added that demons were not originally enemies with humans. He expressed obvious disdain for the start of the war, mockingly asking why it was necessary to start a conflict that led to so many deaths. He chuckled, picked up the cube, and said that Chong had acted wisely after all, deciding to give such a valuable thing into the hands of a great man. After finishing his speech, Xian haughtily thanked him and said that he was flattered. While Xian was busy looking at the cube, Chong took advantage of the opportunity. He quietly bit his finger until it bled, then began to perform the ancient ritual. Having completed all the necessary actions, he quietly and almost soundlessly said that the order was carried out. Wei activated the ancient flower art, using a powerful skill that created an absolute defense. Lu, stunned by what was happening, anxiously asked what all this meant. Wei, concentrating all his spiritual power, created an impenetrable barrier. Then, without hesitation, he bit his finger until it bled and, performing an ancient ritual, activated the demonic element. At that moment, the cube burst into flames, emitting a blinding white light so bright that it was impossible to look at. Xin, shocked by the unexpected turn of events, watched the events unfold with a puzzled expression. Chong raised his head with difficulty and, breathing heavily, said that their poor and despised clan had kept this secret for many centuries, waiting for this very moment. Gradually, his body began to turn to ashes, and despite the pain, he proudly added that, finally, their clan was able to bring real benefit to the entire demonic people, and now he had nothing more to regret. A moment later, the cube exploded, releasing a destructive wave of energy that tore everything around it apart with incredible force. However, the barrier Wei created managed to protect his comrades, keeping the deadly wave outside and preventing the explosion from hitting them. A powerful burst of energy instantly spread over a huge distance, destroying all enemies in its path. On the second wall are demons, alarmed by the flash. Mei, looking at the bright flash in the distance, anxiously asked what was going on there. Suddenly, a giant bolt of lightning struck from the dark sky with a deafening roar, bursting right into the center of the explosion. The fire engulfed Chong, and as he burned in the flames, he bitterly admitted that despite all his efforts, he only managed to activate a tiny fraction, just 1%, of the demonic element's true power. His body was completely exhausted, his breathing became ragged, and he barely moved, realizing that he was no longer able to continue the fight. Having lost the last of his strength, he fell heavily to the ground. However, to his horror, his sacrifice was in vain as Jita, a mighty S-rank thunder dragon, intervened at the last moment. Xin looked around the battlefield with disdain and sternly remarked that Chong's last choice was wrong. With a mocking grin, he added that using his most powerful technique without knowing the opponent's capabilities was extremely unwise. Meanwhile, Chong, trying with all his might to crawl to the cube, could barely move. But Xin was faster. He concentrated the power of lightning in his palm and shot it at the cube with terrifying speed. The lightning struck right on target, knocking the artifact out of Chong's reach. The cube ended up in Xion's hands, who raised it above his head and asked with a sly grin whether Chong was now ready to answer for all the consequences of his actions. Chong looked closely at the artifact and noted with bewilderment that it was difficult to even imagine how such a powerful demonic element could end up in such a place. He added thoughtfully that this territory was not at all like the sacred lands where the first demon lord could have once been born. Xion, radiating authority, gave the order to move on. His cold gaze landed on the dragon, and with an authoritative tone, he ordered it to move forward immediately. However, noticing the slight confusion and hesitation in the dragon's actions, Xion mockingly, and at the same time, sternly asked whether he was going to disobey and go against his comrades. Without waiting for an answer, he activated the chip implanted in the dragon's neck, causing a sharp pain. The dragon let out a long roar, causing everyone around to flinch. Noticing the wounded demons, the dragon instantly began to concentrate a colossal charge of energy in its mouth. Without wasting a second, it released a powerful stream aimed at the enemies. Wei Ming quickly formed a protective seal. He loudly commanded his comrades to protect Lady Lu, but she, noticing Wei's own dangerous situation, objected with excitement, suggesting that he first take care of his own safety. Xion, lightning fast, appeared in front of Wei and struck him in the chest with a crushing force. He looked at him mockingly and sarcastically said that the demon clan, as always, was only good at empty talk. With a challenge in his voice, he added that he would now show them what real strength meant and what a real battle was. General Ho, taking advantage of the moment when Xion was busy with Wei, attempted to launch a sneak attack from a blind spot. But Xion, with good reflexes, managed to intercept his hand before it reached its target. Activating the protective glasses, he instantly received detailed data on the general's characteristics. After examining them carefully, he mockingly noted that Ho's strength and physique were low. He added with a grin that although these figures looked impressive, they were clearly not up to his own, and certainly could not be a reason for pride. Laughing, Xian suggested starting with a demonstration of his strength. Without giving the general time to come to his senses, he broke his arm with a crunch, causing him to roar in piercing pain. Letting go of his opponent's helpless hand, Xian turned his gaze to the rapidly approaching Wu Juan, who rushed towards him with great speed. Using all his might, Wu Juan launched a powerful strike, but Xian, reacting faster, was behind him before he could complete his attack. By activating the scan, Xian obtained information about Wu Juan's characteristics. Seeing that the Demon Lord's speed was significantly greater than that of other opponents, he noted with slight surprise that he had not expected to meet such an enemy here. Quickly approaching Wu Juan, he acknowledged with a cynical grin that he was probably the fastest demon among them. Without a moment's hesitation, he swung his leg furiously and delivered such a crushing blow that Wu Juan, covered in blood, was sent flying several meters away. Without giving his opponent time to recover, Xian walked up and stepped hard on his foot, slowly crushing it under his weight. Wu Juan, gritting his teeth in pain, desperately clung to the ground and screamed loudly, trying to break free from this deadly grip. Xian asked if they really thought they could stand up to him. He added with a laugh that their characteristics were several times inferior to his own. And then, looking around the battlefield, he declared that none of the opponents even came close to his level of strength. Xian began to release lightning, and from these lightnings, dark figures began to slowly form, which gradually took on the outlines of warriors. Wu Juan, feeling growing anxious, weakly raised his head and asked what was going on. Each of the lightning created could be copied and transformed into shadows that would obey his will. Each shadow possessed not only the perception, but also the power of its creator. Xian grabbed Lu's face roughly, squeezing it so hard that her breathing became ragged. Looking closely into her eyes, he calmly said, as if thinking out loud, that he often wondered about the meaning of life for weak creatures. Lifting her head by the chin, he added mockingly that if demons were as weak as humans believed, then why did they still continue to cling to life? For a moment, he was lost in memories. He remembered the distant days of childhood, when, playing with a kitten, he took a thin thread and began to wrap it around its neck. He pulled it tighter and tighter until the kitten, completely deprived of air, died. Even then, as a child, he enjoyed the moment, watching the life leave a helpless creature. He wondered why those who cannot protect themselves live. Squeezing Lu's face even tighter, Xian continued with obvious contempt, adding that the entire existence of these demons had only one purpose: to satisfy his needs. To him, they represented neither value nor threat, merely expendable material in his cruel game. Lu, exhausted, slowly sank to her knees. With tears in her eyes, she whispered that she no longer saw any hope. Xian kicked her hard, causing her to fall face down in the mud. He then began to trample her without the slightest compassion, and his clones, following their master's example, began to beat up the rest of the demons. General Ho, breathing heavily and barely holding back the pain, said with bitterness in his voice that it was all over. He admitted that they had been defeated and expressed regret that they had not been able to save their comrades. Xian laughed and said that this was exactly what he expected from the so-called public defender. Then, with cold indifference, he declared that all this had been predetermined from the very beginning, and that further resistance was pointless. Signaling to one of his clones, Xian calmly watched as he approached the wounded Wu Juan. The clone roughly grabbed Wu Juan by the hair and tilted his head, mockingly asking if this boy was his son. He added with a grin that he was willing to spare him if Wu Juan would kneel and admit defeat. Otherwise, he promised that his son would die here and now. Wu Juan shouted with hatred in his voice that his father would never humiliate himself in front of someone like Xian. Xian laughed even louder and declared that it was his choice, suggesting that General Ho carefully consider the consequences of his stubbornness. General Ho, his will completely broken, fell to his knees. With tears in his eyes and a trembling voice, he begged Exen to spare his son, willing to give anything to save him. Wu Juan, seeing his father stoop so low, said his father with regret and pain in his voice. Xin, grinning as if enjoying the spectacle, asked if he wanted to follow his father's example and also asked for mercy. He added that then perhaps he would let them both go. Wu Juan, filled with hatred and contempt, clenched his fists and shouted bastard. Xin began counting down with a cold smile. He said 10, and suddenly, with lightning speed, he stabbed General Hua in the chest with his sword. Wu Juan, choking on tears, cried out in pain, turning again to his father. Xin, as if enjoying every moment of what was happening, continued counting, saying 8. At that moment, he suddenly pulled the sword out of his chest and easily cut off General Ho's arm, leaving him disarmed and bleeding. 7. Xin said coldly and delivered another deep blow, wounding him more and more with each passing second. Wu Juan, completely drained of strength, fell to his knees, tears of despair in his eyes. Broken and tormented by pain, he begged in a breaking voice, "Please let me go." An oppressive silence reigned on the battlefield, broken only by the sounds of crying and groans of the wounded demons who had lost all hope of salvation. Their strength was completely exhausted, and their faith in a possible miracle had faded away completely. Xin, with a cheerful expression on his face, loudly said that they all bowed before him, and then added with a mocking voice that he faced a difficult choice of which of them he should let go. With a burning desire to see even more suffering, he immediately plunged his sword straight into General Ho's heart. Wu Juan, unable to hold back his tears, screamed loudly, desperately calling for his father. The general, choking with pain and bleeding, weakly begged Xin to let Wu Juan go, sacrificing himself for his son. Wiping the blood from his face with the back of his hand, Xin asked with cold fury in his voice who gave the general the right to act arbitrarily. He then slowly pulled the sword out of Hua's body and contemptuously called him a worthless thing. The general collapsed to the ground, losing his last strength, and Xin said with a grin that he had suddenly changed his mind. However, at that moment, his words were interrupted by a loud and furious cry. Wu Juan, filled with anger and grief, broke free from his chains and launched a furious attack. But Xin, moving faster than he could follow, instantly struck, making a hole in his side, and mockingly said that a new game was beginning. Seeing Liu and Chong calling out for Wu Juan with sadness and fear, Xin wasted no time in using his chains to bind all the demons, completely rendering them unable to resist. A memory of seeing dead kittens hanging flashed before his eyes, which only increased his desire to inflict pain. Xin began to slowly, with particular cruelty, cut into Wu Juan's flesh, enjoying every moment and smilingly declaring that he wanted to test how long he could endure it. Addressing the dragon, standing nearby, he ordered it to come closer in a cold tone. Placing his foot on the dragon as a sign of his superiority, Xin announced that it was time to prepare for the end of the festival. He then contacted the squad and gave the order to call the deputy captain, adding mockingly that the fun was over and everyone had played enough. Xin, pleased with himself, gave the next order with a smile to report to the entire army that they were moving out immediately. However, in response, only a cry full of anger and pain was heard. "Damn, he's so strong. How dare he start a riot?" Xin, puzzled, asked in surprise who dared to speak to him and demanded to know where Bao Li was and where he had gone. At that moment, a hoarse but stern voice came from behind, informing him that he was here. Leo, dragging the crippled man behind him, explained with fury in his voice that Xin should have realized long ago what situation he was in. Crushing the chip he was holding in his hand, Leo added with disdain that he would never have thought that it would be Xin who would be able to seize power and do so using such brutal methods. Leaving a trail of blood behind him, he stated without a shadow of a doubt that he had killed everyone who stood in his way to get here. Xin, still not realizing the seriousness of the threat, looked at Leo with bewilderment and distrust. Leo, looking at him with hatred, gloomily said that he should have realized long ago that a beast remains a beast, no matter how much time passes. He added that Exion's actions were grave sins for which he would sooner or later have to bear the deserved punishment. Enveloping his body in lightning, Exion rose into the air and declared with cold contempt in his voice that he was just another worthless person. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared only to appear right in front of Leo and deliver a crushing blow with his sword. However, Leo, acting faster, managed to block his attack and hit Exion in the face with great force, throwing him back. Pinning Exion to the ground and mercilessly trampling him into it, Leo furiously asked if he was ready for a real fight. Leo grimly listed Exion's crimes, starting with rebellions, moving on to adultery with their women, then robberies, and ending with the murder of comrades, and then asked where to begin. Squeezing his opponent's throat with force, trampling him deeper into the ground, Exion squeezed out a question with difficulty, trying to understand what he was talking about. Bowley stated that there was clearly something wrong with this demon, adding that he had suspected this since their first meeting, when he seemed too knowledgeable about human affairs. Earlier, during a fierce battle on the field, Bowley grabbed a woman and ordered his ice puppet to destroy everyone present. Approaching the woman with a menacing smile, he mockingly noted how sweet she smelled. Holding her by force, he warned his clone to remember well that the boy was not to be touched. Meanwhile, the boy, crying and trembling with fear, begged for his mother. Bowley came very close, ran his tongue along the woman's cheek, and, grinning, mockingly remarked that he wanted the boy to see how he was mocking his mother. But at that moment, Leo suddenly appeared. With devastating force, he destroyed all the ice clones with one powerful blow and freed the child from the enemy's clutches. With malice in his voice, Bowley called Leo another demon, clearly underestimating his strength. Using his creative abilities, he quickly created a new ice puppet, challenging Leo to test its strength. He added with a smirk that this puppet contained half of his own blood and power, making it extremely dangerous. However, Leo, moving at an unimaginable speed, instantly broke the ice creature into small pieces. Bowley, shocked by what he saw, screamed, not believing that someone could destroy his creation so easily. Before he could come to his senses, he felt a powerful blow that threw him to the ground with crushing force. Leo, having received a notification about his level up, as well as a message about having 12 boost points and unlocking a new copy skill, he grabbed Bowley by the hair and angrily demanded that he tell him the whole truth about what had happened to his army. Bowley began his story. He explained that the 511th Squad was originally commanded by Captain Shah from Liao, and his deputy was Manhwa. About a month and a half ago, the deputy hosted a banquet in honor of his upcoming engagement. It was on that day that they decided to act. Captain Shah from Liao was not present at the banquet that day, which gave them a perfect opportunity. While everyone was drunk, he and Exine Biao snuck into the deputy captain's camp. They tied him up and then told him the plan that they wanted to frame the captain. Allegedly, he was taking bribes. He had already taken all the things. It would be better for him to sit quietly. Exine offered Manhwa the position of captain, promising to make him his deputy and threatening that if he refused, they would move against Yunghua. However, Manhwa, deeply indignant, vehemently refused, saying that such actions violated all the rules. But he refused to go against Shah from Liao. Bao Li, without losing his composure, stripped to the waist and said that he was not going to negotiate, and immediately the girl, frightened, began to cry. Holding Manhwa tied up, Exine reminded him with a mocking grin that tonight was his wedding night. Manhwa, desperately trying to free himself, screamed with hatred for them to let go of his bride. Using the power of his overlord's eye, Manhwa attempted to stop them, declaring that he would kill them if they did not stop their actions. Exine mockingly explained that there was poison in his drink, and now any attempts at resistance were useless. Placing a jar of the remaining poison in front of him, He coldly informed him that fighting was futile. Summoning his clone armed with needles, Xin repeated the question, demanding Manhwa answer whether he was willing to support their plot against Sha Fengliao. Manhwa, undaunted by the threats, angrily refused, declaring that he would not betray his captain, even if it cost him his life. In the end, Manhwa died along with his bride, preferring death to betrayal. Bali finished the story by concluding that all this happened only because Manhwa and his fiancée refused to desecrate Sha Fengliao's name. By leaving several of Sha Fengliao's personal belongings that he frequently used at the crime scene, Xin Jibiao made sure that no one would have any doubts about the captain's involvement. One of the soldiers, shocked by what he saw, asked what exactly had happened, while another shouted out in alarm whether he should immediately call someone from the medical room. Xin said that he arrived too late and witnessed the moment when Manhwa took his last breath. He said that Captain Sha Fengliao left the camp in a hurry immediately after the murder. Gathering his commanders around him, Xin Jibiao officially declared Sha Fengliao the prime suspect. He placed all responsibility for what had happened on the captain, and then, without wasting any time, led the army to the camp, deciding to deal with him personally. However, none of the warriors could have predicted that, upon arriving at the camp, they would find it empty. The captain had disappeared. Xin disdainfully announced that Sha Fengliao had escaped, adding that even his personal equipment and weapons, which he always kept with him, were left behind in the camp. Xin Jibiao then sent a request to the divine authorities, demanding an arrest warrant for the captain. In his appeal, he claimed that Sha Fengliao had been caught plotting a mutiny, had raped his squadmate's wife, and had then escaped. Sha had become an army sinner. Before the war began, changes were made in the army's command structure, and through the influence of his father, Xin Jibiao was appointed supreme commander. The tied-up Bao Li, with difficulty breathing, asked why Liu was so interested in the affairs of people. Liu, ignoring his question with cold fury, demanded to know if anyone else understood. Bao Li, through laughter, admitted that the resisting fanatics were simply sacrificed to maintain the appearance of order. He added that he himself does not approve of such methods, and that he should have behaved differently. Bao Li declared that he had finished his story and demanded to be released, suggesting that he turn to Captain Xin, who, in his opinion, could spare him. Liu, without showing any compassion, slowly pulled out his knife and began to cut off Bao Li's lower limbs, causing him to scream in pain. The beaten enemy, bleeding, cursed Liu in despair and begged him to spare him. Liu was about to continue, but a sudden voice stopped him. The girl, sobbing with fear, told Liu that this was the combat uniform he had given to General Wei Ming. He had kept it for him. She added that the general had long foreseen the crisis and had specially left the equipment for Liu. She asked to take the form and run away because he is the last hope of the demons. It is not worth dying in this battle. The girl also mentioned that she had recently received a message from General Wei Ming and expressed concern that something might have happened to him and his troops. After putting on the Demon Lord's armor, Liu immediately felt a significant increase in his strength, speed, and defense. Activating the Demon Transformation skill, his attire transformed, taking on an even more powerful appearance. The girl shouted after him that the exit was on the other side, but he, throwing a frowning look at her, declared that he was not going to go anywhere. Holding the prisoner, Liu said that he intended to personally go to Xin Jibiao and deal with him. Bao Li shouted that it was suicide because there was no way to stand up to such an enemy. Bao Li continued to shout with fury in his voice that Xin would finish him off, and Liu could only pray for a quick death. At this moment, Liu was pressing down on Xin with incredible force, and Bao Li, choking with fear, suddenly thought about who Liu was and why he was interested in people. Meanwhile, Xin, taking advantage of the situation, changed his location with the clone. Appearing in the blind spot, he took out a device capable of analyzing the enemy's characteristics. After analyzing the data he received, Xin arrogantly remarked that Liu was only an elite A-rank demon whose speed and defense were half that of his own. Xin chuckled and easily concluded that Leo was an ordinary elite demon who relied on brute force and luck. He immediately ordered his clones to attack. One of the clones, swinging his sword, mockingly declared that Leo would not last long. However, the demon, having evaded the blow with lightning speed, delivered a crushing counterattack, throwing the clone far back. The clone that flew away admitted with horror that Leo was much faster than he had expected. Leo, gathering all his strength, concentrated and prepared to strike again, saying that it was his turn. Xin concentrated on the data he saw, comparing it with his own characteristics. Judging by the enemy's strength level, the indicators looked quite decent, but his own parameters were significantly superior. After reviewing the parameters again, he noted with irritation that the enemy's relics were somehow unavailable for analysis. After doing a quick calculation, Xin determined that Leo's strength was 4,102 units, but thanks to the use of weapons, it increased to 5,424 units. Leo's speed, according to his data, was 1477, while Xion's own speed was an impressive 3732. Based on this, he made the logical conclusion that the opponent was not physically faster than him, so he could act. Xion sent another clone to attack, who, smiling sarcastically, suggested that Leo start the game. However, before the clone could finish his sentence, Leo instantly blocked the attack and, acting with lightning speed, delivered a fatal blow. Xion, seeing this, could not believe his own eyes and, puzzled, began to suspect that the enemy might have hidden abilities. Leo, with a slight wave of his hand, noted mockingly that relying on second-rate data was a big mistake. At this moment, his hidden attribute, the Demon Lord title, was activated. He struck with such force that the ground split, and asked with a grin if Xion considered himself to be all-seeing. Refusing to accept what was happening, Xion sent many clones into battle at once. But Leo easily dealt with each of them, leaving the enemy no chance. One of Xion's clones shouted that his speed was beyond anything possible. But Leo, getting ahead of him, suddenly appeared behind him and delivered such a powerful blow that the clone flew back a considerable distance. After this, Xion realized that he could not see the enemy's true characteristics. However, he decided that regardless of Leo's hidden abilities, the tactic of overwhelming numbers would still work. But then the clone approached Lu, who was being held captive, and with a grim grin informed her that her comrade was now in his hands. He then shouted loudly across the battlefield to Leo that the demon lady was now completely under his control. Xion grinned evilly and clamped his hands tightly around Lu's throat, watching her suffer with obvious pleasure. Wujuan loudly declared that Xion would never be able to win, and asked with disdain whether he was so desperate that he had to resort to such mean tricks. Xion, ignoring these words, grabbed the chain that Lu was tied with and pulled it with force, depriving the girl of the ability to breathe. Leo, seeing this, was overcome with furious anger. He confidently walked forward, mentally noting that he had seen such tricks before. Xion mockingly announced that this was the end for everyone present. Pulling the chain even harder, he made everyone scream in pain, intending to break the spirit of his opponents. After causing the bound demons unbearable suffering, Xion triumphantly declared that Leo had already lost his will to fight. Then, with a mocking grin on his face, he mockingly said, "Come on, isn't he a strong man?" The man tugged at the chains again and declared that despite Leo's speed, he would not be able to save everyone. If he decided to save one, the other would certainly die. Xion, glaring at Leo, sarcastically asked what choice he would make. Leo clenched his fist so hard that his nails dug into his skin, causing bleeding wounds, and ran forward. Xion, shocked to the depths of his soul, cried out, not believing his eyes that Leo had actually started running. Wujuan, overcome with rage, shouted that Leo had to save the lady no matter what it took. But Leo instantly appeared next to the enemy, and with one precise movement, plunged 3 fingers straight into the clone's body. The blow was so devastating that the clone was thrown back a huge distance. Wu Juan asked in confusion why Leo decided to help him, since it was the lady who needed to be saved. Leo, smiling and pointing at himself, asked, "Who said that only he was saved?" At this time, the ice puppet, which embodied the general's demonic power, came to Lu's rescue and immediately destroyed the clone, cutting it into pieces. Leo immediately gave the puppet a new order to free all the captives and help them. Following the command, the ice puppet cut the chains with one swift blow of its sword, releasing the wounded demons. Baoli froze in bewilderment. He wondered with amazement how Leo had managed to master such a complex skill. A thought flashed through his mind. Wasn't he the only one who could use this skill? How could that be? The clone, despite the obvious advantage of the enemy, tried to attack the puppet, but she easily intercepted his movement, grabbed him by the head, and slammed him into the ground with incredible force. Leo, watching what was happening, explained with a grin that the puppet's power was identical to his own. He remembered how long he had thought about choosing the right skill to copy, and now he realized with satisfaction that he had made the right choice. Baoli still couldn't believe his eyes and thought that Leo had really just copied this skill. Ice Blood Puppet is the newest skill that Leo has mastered, but despite its terrifying power, it is not without its weaknesses. The first weakness is that the water element must be present to activate the skill. The second weakness is that the puppets require blood to be created and in large quantities so that they can draw power from it. Baoli calculated that if the puppet had the same strength as Leo, the amount of blood needed to create it should be small. His thoughts were abruptly interrupted, and he quickly warned the captain that fighting the puppet was pointless. Baoli then clarified that Leo was using his own skill and added that it would be more logical to attack Leo himself, who was currently weakened, rather than engage in combat with his creation. Xin made his final decision without hesitation, realizing that the situation had become completely clear. That's it. Everything was now clear. One single blow and it would all be over. One of his clones confidently grabbed the spear in his hands, feeling the concentrated power in it, and gathering all possible power through the weapon with destructive speed. There was a whistle in the air. The spear tore through space, leaving behind a flash of energy and rushed towards the target. Xin was already anticipating victory. With a wide smile, he confidently declared that this fight was over. However, his joy did not last long. Suddenly, Leo, overcome with rage, loudly and defiantly called out for him to continue. Xin frowned in complete bewilderment. How so? He had hit the target right on target. He had seen the spear pierce the body. Why was Leo still standing in front of him? It was impossible. He had killed him. Without wasting a second, he gave the command to his clones, and in the blink of an eye, they surrounded Leo from all sides, preparing for the decisive blow. At his command, the clones rushed to attack, raining down a barrage of swift and merciless blows on the enemy. Blades pierced the air. Blows fell one after another. But nothing changed. Leo didn't even move. He stood in the middle of a whirlwind of attacks, without a single scratch. Leo confidently said that it was not enough. He wanted more. His scanning vision activated automatically, and enemy data appeared before his eyes. But what he saw horrified him. Why was Leo bleeding so much? What was going on? This demon is definitely something wrong with him. Not only are his characteristics incredible, but his personality is completely different from others. Leo activated his ability, the Heavenly Demon Illusion skill. With hatred in his eyes, Leo asked Xin a direct question. Was this really the end of his pathetic tricks? Xin realized in horror that in his current state, he had no chance of winning. He had to flee immediately, otherwise this would be his last fight. The only sensible decision that flashed through my head was to fly into the sky, because there was enough thunder there. He will be able to use its power, create countless copies, and change the course of the battle. Leo sharply cut his hand on the blade, letting his own blood flow down and, activating an ancient skill, summoned a bloody ice puppet. "I rely on you completely," he said. The puppet immediately sat down next to the wounded demons, guarding and protecting them. Bao Li, watching this, suddenly realized something important. He should have realized this earlier. He was too concerned about people's problems. Besides, he knows all the captain's skills. He knows them better than anyone. But he is not a demon. Leo, without wasting any time, said with cold fury in his voice that rain, snow, or clear skies all made no difference. The ice puppets absorbed his blood power, increasing tenfold. Leo firmly stated that he had enough water, and each of Exion's clones was now under his control. He sighed and added mockingly that he really could hope to defeat him. Exion, with fury in his voice, loudly ordered the dragon to attack. But, noticing that it remained motionless, he shouted in anger, demanding an explanation for why it was not fighting. Meanwhile, Leo quickly dispersed the enemy's copies, turning them into dust with one swing of his sword, while blinding illusions of the heavenly demon flared up around him. His eyes glowed with a cold fire as he clenched his fist, releasing a powerful pulse of energy. In a low, hate-filled voice, he said that it was time to end this bloody spectacle. Exion froze, intensely analyzing the situation. It became clear to him that in a fair fight, he did not have the slightest chance. He knew very well what Leo was capable of. He saw how he destroyed his enemies with terrifying ease. But he still had an ace up his sleeve. He concluded that despite his incredible regenerative powers, Leo was not immortal. Exion's lips twisted into a sinister grin as he recalled his S-rank weapon, Muse. This legendary sword not only accumulated energy, but also had a powerful defensive aura. If it was filled with energy to the limit, it could destroy an opponent with one decisive blow. But then, the puppet suddenly picked up the sword and forcefully thrust it straight into the heart. At the same time, Exion, using incredible speed, crossed the battlefield, arriving in a safe zone. He can instantly switch between his copies, avoiding fatal blows. Leo won't be able to kill him unless he finds the true master among the many shadows. Bali realized the essence of what was happening and exclaimed that everything was clear. The captain uses the power of thunder and lightning to create copies, moving between them at incredible speeds. Until he himself takes the initiative, he cannot be destroyed. However, Bao Li remembered one critical limitation. The ice puppet that allowed the creation of clones had a time limit. No matter how much blood the host had, it was impossible to use this ability forever. With a smile, Bao Li declared that Leo was doomed. He would not be able to win, because the captain was invulnerable. But before he could finish his thought, Leo grabbed the closest clone in a headlock, squeezing him so hard he couldn't move. "God damn it," he hissed, who said he couldn't win. He had already said earlier that Xian would pay for every crime he committed. Xian froze for a moment, a shadow of the past reflected in his eyes. He remembered his childhood and, with bitterness in his voice, whispered that the kitten should not die so quickly. He had not yet had time to enjoy it enough. Then, clenching his jaw, Leo sharply tightened his grip, reminding that every crime would return to the culprit many times over. His fingers closed so tightly that it seemed like he was about to rip the clone's head off. He declared in a voice full of hatred that all the pain inflicted on living beings would now fall upon him. Xian wheezed, his body convulsing in unbearable pain. Trembling, bleeding, he thought in horror, how does he know all this? But Leo wasn't going to stop there. He continued with grim satisfaction that the coup plotters, to which Xian belonged, had conspired to revolt, raped women, tortured children, and mistreated their teammates. At that moment, he tore the clone's head off with a jerk, and her lifeless body fell to the ground. Without a trace of emotion, he said that even his death could not atone for all his sins. Exon, clutching his head and shaking with fear, screamed from unbearable pain. At this time, the ice puppet grabbed another clone and tore it apart with inhuman strength. Leo wasted no time in cutting the other copy in half, leaving behind only red splatter. He coldly said that Xin should feel all the pain that he himself caused to living beings. Bao Li, shocked, realized the terrible truth. He was wrong. Leo had not planned to simply kill the captain. No, he had tortured him, dragging out the execution, making him feel fear, pain, and despair. Xin staggered to his knees, his body shaking from the wounds, gasping for breath, clutching at the tears in his flesh with his fingers. He cursed in despair, but he had no more strength to fight. An inner voice begged him to hold on a little longer. If he could activate his last trump card, he might have a chance. Gathering the last of his energy, he shouted that his S-rank weapon had finally arrived. A blinding flash of light flashed through the air, emitting a terrifying glow. Raising it above his head, Xin loudly declared that this sword was meant to exterminate the entire demon clan. One day, a small thunder dragon, deftly jumping from one branch to another, eluded the people pursuing him. Down in the shade of the oaks, one of the hunters asked persistently if anyone had seen the thunder dragon. Another man, frowning, replied regretfully that the dragon had already managed to disappear. The dragon, feeling safe, stopped for a moment, but, turning around, he saw with horror a boy next to him. His red eyes flashed with fear, and he began to growl loudly, showing that he was ready to defend himself. But instead of fear, the boy's eyes reflected only genuine curiosity and kindness. He slowly extended his hand, in which lay several cookies, and in a quiet, friendly voice asked if she wanted some. Meanwhile, Sha Fengliao was looking at the horizon with a scowl. He said that not long ago, a bloody war broke out between humans and demons for the possession of a magic crystal. Because of this merciless battle, humans are now starving. With sadness in his eyes, he added that he dreamed of seeing the end of the war, hoping that one day both peoples could find a peaceful solution. The Thunder Dragon suddenly remembered everything. Bright flashes of the past flashed before his eyes. Leo held out his hand, his voice cold and commanding. He demanded his sword back. Suddenly, the weapon that Xin was clutching in his hand trembled and broke into several pieces with a cracking sound. In an instant, like a stream of light, the sword fragments flew towards Leo, and the blade, obeying its true owner, began to recover right in his hands. The metal connected with a melodious, ringing sound, and magical symbols flashed on the blade, confirming the weapon's return to its rightful owner. Leo calmly said that the sword had never belonged to Xin. Xion's eyes widened. He couldn't believe what was happening. His voice was filled with despair as he exclaimed, asking how this was possible. He had tied the sword to himself. Leo, looking at him with undisguised hatred, only smirked and uttered words of gratitude in an icy tone for the fact that Xin had managed to improve his blade. Swinging his sword with all his might, Leo summoned a powerful wind that swept across the battlefield at incredible speed, tearing all of Xion's remaining clones to shreds. But the force of the impact was so great that the hurricane flow engulfed the entire territory, mercilessly sweeping away everything in its path and taking lives. Bao Li, shocked by what he saw, opened his mouth in horror, trying to say something, but suddenly realized the cruel truth of what was happening. Meanwhile, the Thunder Dragon, seeing a familiar face in front of him, froze for a moment. And then, with a slight bow of his head, he acknowledged the return of the friend he had been waiting for so long. Bao Li, watching the scene with wide eyes, noticed how the clones began to disappear one after another, as if crumbling into dust. At the same time, the dark clouds dispersed, the rumble of thunder died down, and lightning no longer tore through the sky. But hope for Xin was fading with every second. Ice puppets surrounded him tightly, depriving him of his last chance for salvation. Leo, with an unwavering determination in his eyes, confidently approached. Slowly raising his sword and placing the sharp blade at his throat, he grimly declared that the battle was over. 2 years ago, in one of the dense forests of the state of Changhua, a demon fell from the sky. Sha Fengliao, standing on a hill, asked, "Did you see where the demon fell?" His gaze was firm as he told them to proceed to the crash site without delay. Pointing to the crash site, Sha asked, "What does that mean? Pretending to be a dog?" In response, the dragon simply shook his head. He shrugged his shoulders and added with a slight grin that he knew he wasn't a dog. After all, who would even think that? He extended his hand and slowly ran his palm over the dragon's soft, scaled wing, adding that he was his main partner. They say that once upon a time, dogs were also people's best friends. At this moment, the Thunder Dragon, despite the order he had received, did not obey. The next second, as punishment for his disobedience, the beetle unleashed a powerful wave of pain on him. Xian, realizing that he was losing control of the situation, furiously shouted out a new order to seize him. Leo, watching what was happening, slowly turned his gaze to Xian and with cold hatred noted that there was no thunder, so he was powerless, and he had nowhere to run. Xian analyzed the situation in his mind. He knew that the Thunder Dragon's speed was estimated at 10,000 units, making it virtually invincible. Gritting his teeth, he pressed the button sharply and, breaking into a scream, quickly followed him, otherwise he would blow him up. The Thunder Dragon felt an unbearable, tearing pain pierce his body, causing him to shudder. But through his torment, he suddenly realized that after so many years of loneliness, he had found a friend again, and this caused tears to flow down his cheeks. Leo, his voice filled with sadness, shouted the dragon's name. He realized that there was a bomb inside his friend. Xian, without wasting any time, rushed towards the dragon and gave the order to take off immediately. Bao Li, noticing that Xian intended to leave the battlefield and leave him alone, cried out in despair, reminding himself of himself. Xian angrily declared that this was a clan of scum and he would never return here again. However, despite all the losses, he managed to obtain the element. Wei Ming, watching this, noticed that General Gon's speed was about the same. Wu Juan looked at Leo, carefully studying his expression. Finally, he asked him what he was thinking. Was he really going to let them go? Suddenly, Leo heard a voice in his mind. It was Jita. Her tone was filled with confidence, and she firmly stated that she believed in him. He had nothing to worry about. At that moment, the dragon flapped its wings and threw Xian into the air, causing him to lose control. Jita asked him if he remembered the game they once played. The dragon threw Xian into the air and he, overcome with panic and fear, screamed, demanding to know what was happening. Suddenly, Jita suddenly jumped forward and grabbed Xian with her powerful teeth in a flash. He immediately felt a sharp, piercing pain and, gritting his teeth, shouted a threat. Jita, ignoring his cries, shot up with a powerful jerk, rapidly rising to the highest point in the sky. She said to Leo, "Let's continue, but now it's his turn." When she reached her limit, her wings suddenly folded and she shot down like an arrow with incredible speed. Leo stood firmly in a fighting stance, feeling all his strength and fury being concentrated into his sword. Xian, realizing that he was in a hopeless situation, was overcome with panic. In a breaking voice, he said that he was not to blame. Then, convulsively squeezing the small device in his fingers, he pressed the button with maniacal determination, announcing the beginning of the self-destruction process. Jita wasted no time in flying next to Leo, allowing him to attack her. She knew full well that they only had a few moments left before it was too late. At that moment, Leo, concentrating all his strength into one blow, delivered a powerful, swift attack, destroying the bug attached to Jita's body. The Thunder Dragon, overloaded, collapsed to the ground, breathing heavily, his body shaking in pain, and blood gushing from his mouth. Bao Li, unable to believe his eyes, stepped back and exclaimed in horror that it had actually exploded. He could not comprehend how such a thing was possible. Xian, choking on blood, saw Leo approaching him with a gloomy expression and instantly lost all his confidence. There was a pleading tone in his voice as he trembled his lips and forced out a plea for mercy. However, without waiting for an answer, rage boiled up inside him and he shouted in a breaking voice the question, "Why doesn't he die?" Leo said with hatred that he should have thought earlier. He shouldn't have been betrayed. Xian, shocked by his words, squinted, trying to understand what he was talking about. He asked what exactly he meant and who he betrayed. Leo, without showing an ounce of pity, looked down at him as if he were a nobody. Leo, without deigning to give him any further explanation, ordered him in a cold, hate-filled voice, upon seeing Manhwa, not to forget to apologize to him for that night. These words shook Xian to the core. Horror flashed in his eyes, and he angrily shouted out Sha Feng Liao's name. But he didn't have time to think about it, because the next moment Leo swung his sword, leaving a deep, bloody cut on his face. Then he said what kind of coup d'etat and rebellion this was. With the next blow, he mercilessly reminded him of the crime of violence. As he dealt a few more merciless blows, each time he increasingly remembered the countless mockeries of the demons, the tortures to which they were subjected. As he cut Xian's body into 4 pieces, he made his final accusation for the murder of his comrades. Blood was gushing from deep wounds, his body was cut into many pieces. Xian died slowly, painfully, feeling his strength leaving him with every second. But even that didn't stop Leo. His anger did not subside. As he struck again, he angrily reminded him that he had taken away all his weapons, his G2. Looking at the exhausted enemy with undisguised hatred, Leo said coldly that a man capable of such ruthlessness did not deserve the right to live. One last look of contempt, and he pronounced the final verdict that he would be sentenced to death. Remembering all the evil that Xian had done, all the ruined lives, all the suffering he had brought, Leo said that this was the end. Bao Li, watching this scene, felt his hands begin to tremble. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. He realized that this demon standing before them was their captain, and he never ran away. Suddenly, the system's voice rang out, announcing that Leo had destroyed the human team's boss, changed the course of history, and as a result, received a reward of 2,200,000 points. Meanwhile, Hao Jinga, looking at Sha's body, calmly noted that this issue needed to be resolved as soon as possible. She added that everything that belonged to him, his weapons, his equipment, and of course, his dragon, would now return to him. Smiling, Hao Jinga softly said that with this, his chosen one would also return to him. Meanwhile, on human soil, news arrived that there was alarming news coming from the front lines. The soldier reported that the 511th Division of the 21st Army had suffered a complete defeat. General Xian Jibiao had decided to sacrifice himself. There was no emotion in Xian Cheng's eyes as he indifferently asked the only question, "Is there a body?" The soldier shook his head and bitterly replied that the general's body had never been returned. Xian Chong, with icy calm, gave the order to prepare an empty coffin and inform the whole world that his son had died heroically in battle. Suddenly, he cried out sharply that the fish was biting, demanding that he be helped immediately. Meanwhile, his youngest son, Xian Ling, with anger and hatred in his eyes, muttered through his teeth that he would destroy all enemies. At Feng's palace, the demon announced that a letter from the Alliance inviting him to the conference would arrive within 3 days. He then asked if His Excellency had decided on a candidate. Dao Meidan thought that for him, the Alliance conference was nothing more than a public repentance, but he could not avoid participating. Finally, he said that the state should not hand over A-rank demons, because they are too valuable. However, participating in the conference is a huge risk, and not everyone will return alive. The demon with a dangerous voice asked if His Excellency had made a final decision. Dao Meidan, with visible anxiety on his face, imploringly asked to be given 2 more days to think it over, swearing that he would make up his mind during that time. However, the demon did not wait for an answer. Suddenly, his tentacles darted forward, piercing the ruler's face, and he said in an icy voice that he was ready to help him make the right decision. At the same time, far to the south, in Yunhua, a young girl bowed respectfully and handed over a letter from the Alliance. She said that Yunhua had experienced too many events in just a few days, and Yunhua decided to send support. Lu took a deep breath and accepted the news with gratitude. knowing how important any help was right now. The girl reminded that the lady should rest and soon give an answer as to who she will send to the conference. After all, this event will be the largest of the demon clan. On the other side of the city, the kid concentrated all his power, directing it at the ruins of the destroyed building. In the blink of an eye, the walls began to recover, the stones returning to their places. Seeing this, the builder advised Tian Xiao to take a break for a while, since General Jiang had been looking for him for a long time. General Jiang finally found him and noted with a warm smile that he had not even expected to see such a young worker helping in the restoration of the city. Tian Xiao bowed deeply and said with gratitude, "Naturally." Then he thanked for transplanting his mother's second heart. General Jiang said that it had stopped beating in his body because of the explosion and that it had fit his mother perfectly. Besides, he was indebted to him. He sighed and noted that among humanity, as well as among demons, there are both good and evil creatures. Those who do evil get what they deserve. The scene where Baoli begged for mercy, assuring him that he would never come near their clan again, came back to him. However, fate was merciless. Cerberus's huge demonic dogs approached him and sensed his fear. Baoli, realizing his doom, screamed in despair, begging for it to stop. But the Cerberuses snarled and pounced on him, tearing into his flesh. Those who do good are rewarded. This is the credo of their poor clan. However, his brother violated it in life, so he does not regret his death. Unexpectedly, Tian Xiao sharply objected, causing General Jiang to be very surprised. The kid stated with firm determination that his brother had indeed been a terrible demon before. He said that on the day the men attacked them, his brother was not concerned about his own health. Tian Xiao remembered how he had not hesitated to stand up for him and his mother when they were in danger of dying. The moment when Jiang Doupan, shouting orders to hurry, grabbed his mother and told him that his heart couldn't take it much longer flashed brightly in his memory. The kid clenched his fists tighter and quietly added that after that he met that man. Jiang Doupan, handing over the container with the heart, firmly ordered him to take it and leave immediately, assuring him that he himself would stay. Tian Xiao said that he gave his life for him and his mother. He is their true savior. Chong Dutsao, with his eyes red from tears and a smile on his face, said that no matter how hard he tried, he still couldn't understand his brother. His voice wavered as he added, with a slight sadness, that he hadn't changed a bit since childhood. Meanwhile, Wei Ming stated that the magical element had been the most important source of energy for the country's defense for the past 2 centuries. When handing over the cube, Wei Ming said that by the unanimous decision of the 3 great demon generals, this thing could only be given to General Gon. He continued, explaining that this artifact was capable of greatly advancing 1 to S rank, as well as awakening extremely powerful skills. However, Liu said to save it and that this resource could be used to restore Yunghua after the recent destruction. After a short pause, he turned around, smiled slightly, and suddenly announced that he was leaving Yunghua. Wei Ming suddenly raised his head and, with his eyes wide open, exclaimed, asking hopefully if he was joking. Liu thought that if things continued like this, he would become so powerful that no one would be able to kill him. He realized that if he didn't return to the people as soon as possible, they would begin to suffer from such changes. Liu thought that he didn't know how Nana was now. Liu is human, and they're demonic. There should be nothing in common between them. He sighed heavily and thought that his only wish after death was to be reborn as a human again. However, the demons would not help him with that. Jita assured with firm confidence that Princess Hao was completely safe. Then he promised to stay with him. Liu, hearing this, smiled and said good with gratitude. Jita tilted his head slightly and asked where exactly Liu wanted to go. Wei Ming suddenly felt anxious and shouted loudly, asking where General Gon was going to go. The dragon spread its wings and the next moment soared into the sky. Wei shouted after him again, but it was useless. Meanwhile, in the silence of the hospital room, Wu Juan sat next to his father's bed. He asked again, for the umpteenth time that day, If they had told him when a new prosthesis would finally be delivered? General Ho, in a tired voice, reminded that this was the third time that day that he had asked this question. Then, he, without taking his eyes off his son, thoughtfully and with slight concern asked, "What about him?" Wu Juan slowly stood up, pulled his hood up, and quietly said that it was time for him to leave and that his father should rest. He found himself thinking that since the moment he first met him, the demon world had changed beyond recognition. And the more he thought about it, the more he felt the hatred growing inside him. He finally realized what he should have realized long ago, that he was not a demon. He realized with sadness and pain that Leo was unfortunately just a dead man. The system once again reminded that turning into a human is only possible in one case, if he is killed. Leo sighed heavily and noted that no matter how many times he asked this question, the answer always remained the same. He added thoughtfully that, due to his natural tendency to regenerate, dying was not an easy task for him. Leo guessed that perhaps if he could find another S-rank demon lord, the chances of him dying would increase significantly. The only time he had ever met the overlord in the tower came back to him. Taking a deep breath, he asked G2 to help him come up with a plan to kill him. Jita nodded in agreement, but then added thoughtfully that he was a contract being, so it seemed a little strange to help him figure out how to die. Suddenly, a huge piece of rock fell from above with a deafening roar, right at Leo. However, Jita reacted with lightning speed and cut the boulder into small pieces without even flinching. The dragon frowned and regretfully admitted that he simply wanted to protect Leo from danger. Leo, in shock, demanded that he not interfere and not try to protect him. Jita looked at him carefully and finally said with complete confidence that he now understood his intention. At that moment, a huge bear suddenly emerged from the bushes, its eyes glowing scarlet, and sharp fangs gleaming in its mouth. It suddenly rushed forward, attacking. Jita reacted instantly, letting out a furious roar that shook the air and tore the beast apart with one powerful blow. The dragon sighed heavily and quietly asked for forgiveness. Leo waved it off, assuring him that it wasn't that important and he shouldn't worry. Later in the evening, Leo sat by the fire, watching the meat slowly roast over the flames. When he finally got down to eating and had eaten several large pieces, he leaned back and admitted with a satisfied smile that he had eaten too much. Then, turning to Jite, he took the sword and, putting his strength into it, easily released it and told him to eat too. As he disassembled his weapons, he announced in a firm voice that at dawn they would head west to try to find another magical tower. Jita frowned and noted that this goal was unclear because even if there really was a tower in the west, it was not a fact that an S-rank overlord would be there. Leo just sighed tiredly and asked what he could do then. It just so happened that people also live in the west, and he simply had no other choice. At this moment, Jita suddenly tensed up and said warningly that someone was approaching. It wasn't even a few seconds before Wu Juan, without wasting any time, put his sword right to Leo's throat and said that he left without even saying goodbye. It wasn't right. He then added that a celebratory banquet was being held in Yunhua and asked why the hero of such an important event was leaving the city. Leo, as if nothing special had happened, asked with slight sarcasm why Wu Juan himself was not celebrating the holiday. Wu Juan clenched his fists and suddenly he cried out angrily, demanding an answer to who he was anyway, and why had he come to them. Jita, watching him, calmly noted that despite his anger, Wu Juan had no desire to kill. Wu Juan demanded an explanation, asking harshly, what relation does Leo have to humans? Why does he know so much? And this dragon and weapons? But Leo, without flinching, confidently took the sword in his hand and declared in a firm voice that he was a man. Leo sighed tiredly and noted with slight sadness that, unfortunately, he wouldn't be able to kill him, but it would be very nice. Wu Juan couldn't contain his emotions and, breaking into a scream, with hatred in his voice, exclaimed that, it turns out, all this time Leo wasn't trying to protect him, wasn't saving him, but was only looking for a way to die. Anger clouded his mind, and squeezing his fingers around Leo's throat, he said that Leo had saved his father, pulled him out of the dungeon, and during the battle with the humans, when he could have escaped, he had stayed to fight. It turns out that he just wanted to die. Why? Why? Leo, without showing any emotion, calmly explained that his death was necessary in order to be reborn as a human. He explained that he was originally a human, but by mistake ended up in the body of a demon and now must die to return to his former state. Wujuan, overcome with rage, screamed for an explanation. If Leo was so desperate for death, then why did he kill his comrades? He reminded them that they could have killed him if he had simply not intervened. The anger in his voice grew stronger. He added that Leo could have just waited for them to die and then stepped towards certain death himself. Why didn't he do that when the humans could have won and then he would have returned? Why did he help the demon clan? Leo just shook his head and firmly replied that everything was much more complicated than it seemed. It was a matter of principles. His voice became firm as he added that he could not condone cruelty. He can't stand it when someone does evil and continues to commit outrages with impunity. Wujuan responded angrily by reminding them that the human race had invaded their lands, forced the demons to defend themselves, and caused countless deaths. He added with pain that it was the humans who had killed his mother. Clenching his fists, he screamed with hatred that he despised people and wanted them all to die, including Leo himself. For a moment his voice broke, and he bitterly admitted that he had hoped for something else. He had wanted to believe that Leo would turn out to be a demon after all. Jita, watching him, quietly said that she felt his pain, his inner suffering that he could not cope with. Leo, without turning around, walked around him and said that it was time for him to go. Jita, not understanding, asked if he would not talk to him. Leo replied that he did not want to interfere in the affairs of demons, and that he and Wujuan were not friends. Wujuan gritted his teeth and announced that the union meeting would be held in a week. This is a major event where representatives from all 18 countries of the demon race will gather. He added that a tournament would be held as part of the meeting, in which the 2 strongest demons from each country would compete. Among the participants, there will even be S-rank demons, the greatest warriors of their race. Wujuan invited Leo to participate in the tournament, saying that if he really wanted to die, there simply would not be a better chance. However, he warned that despite Yungua's neutrality, his opponents should not be underestimated, as any of them could prove deadly. Leo asked in surprise if it was really allowed to kill opponents in the tournament. Wujuan replied that of course it was, because they had to prove their determination. Jita looked at him carefully and quietly confirmed that he was telling the truth. His words were not false, but there was something else in them. Wujuan firmly stated that Yunghua had no right to lose this tournament because no country wanted to appear weak. He then invited Leo to join him. He promised that if he helped him win, he would help him die. S-rank demon lords are not easy to kill. Leo looked at him silently in response, then grinned, without hesitation extended his hand and shook it, saying we had a deal. Lu began to explain that the Demon Alliance was a united empire consisting of 18 large and small demon kingdoms. She said that in this world, there were 10 mysterious regions from which the power of the world came, and that the current demon clan owned the second region. She further explained that the Alliance Conference is held for 2 main purposes. Firstly, the leaders of all countries gather for a joint meeting to discuss strategies for future development and the unification of the remaining demons. Secondly, the conference elects the next leader of the alliance. Lu noted that the elections are held in a competitive format every 3 years. Lu said that in a world where strength is paramount, it is vital to identify a strong leader, so this election method is considered the best option. However, according to her, in recent times, the conference has ceased to be a place of unification and has turned into an arena of merciless confrontation, where each country seeks to demonstrate its power and suppress its rivals. Lu added that the so-called alliance of 18 countries has actually been pursuing only its own interests for a long time, and there is no unity or peace there. She emphasized that for the sake of victory, these countries are ready to do anything and will send the most ferocious demon generals. Lu said that 36 warriors had participated in the last competition, but only 5 had survived. This year, the 3 greatest powers of Yangwa, Yugwa, and Legwa would definitely field S-rank warriors who could turn the tide of any battle with a single blow. She added with alarm that none of the warriors her father had sent had returned alive. She stated that it was not too late to change everything and urged them not to leave, but turning around, she noticed that Leo and Wujuan had disappeared. An hour passed before Leo announced that they had arrived. Looking at the majestic city spread out before him, he admitted that in his past life he had never had the opportunity to see this place and that he had always thought of it as just an abandoned house. The dragon, slowly flying across the sky, looked around with interest and was surprised that everything turned out to be completely different from what he had imagined. Before them appeared the capital of Yingwa, a city striking in its beauty, combining ancient traditions and the latest achievements of demonic civilization. Lu noted with admiration that only a few years had passed, but Baidi had changed a lot. She added with a smile that there would be a dinner party there that evening, but turning around, she again noticed that Leo and Wujuan had disappeared. Meanwhile, Leo, approaching the shop, was amazed to notice the incredible variety of fruits, many of which he had never seen before. Wujuan watched him and mentally snorted, thinking that the people in this world had seen absolutely nothing. He just thought gloomily that he had already forgotten that in the end he would still have to kill him. Leo, looking at the fruit, thought that the melon with black stripes on a green background was familiar to him only from books and that it was probably a legendary fruit. The seller, noticing his interest, asked with a slight smile if he was from the East and expressed surprise that he had never seen such a fruit. The merchant broke the fruit in half, handed one piece to Leo, and explained that it was a watermelon. He offered to try it. Then he proudly added that this watermelon was grown in a magical field and has a unique property. It instantly restores physical strength. At this time, Wujuan thought that this was an A-rank weapon in front of him and was surprised that it was mass-produced in some roadside store. Looking around the display cases, he noted with bewilderment that here you could even find weapons brought from Yunhua. At that moment, a merchant approached him and, measuring him with an attentive gaze, asked whether he was from Yunhua. Then, with a disdainful tone in his voice, he remarked that their weapons were not nearly as good as those produced in Yinghua. With a smug smile, he declared that Yinghua was superior to Yunhua in every way: military power, resources, economy, and even territory. After that, he asked curiously if they had come simply as spectators to watch the upcoming competition. Wujuan glanced at him casually and replied briefly that he was not a spectator, but one of the participants. At this moment, standing next to the weapon stand, was the warrior mage representing the Yugwa country, Xianglin. She looked at Wujuan appraisingly, and then with a slight mockery in her voice suggested that, apparently, Yunhua was really bad with candidates. A hint of superiority flashed across her gaze, but Wujuan only stared at her with cold hatred. Xianglin, ignoring his reaction, turned to the merchant and ordered him to pick up an S-rank weapon for her and deliver it directly to her hotel. The merchant, accepting the money, laughed and mockingly remarked that Yunhua really looked like he was going to have a hard time. Xianglin, releasing her energy, confidently declared that her opponents would fall before Yugua's power. Wujuan, feeling the powerful flow of energy emanating from her, realized that the person in front of him was an S-rank demon. Wujuan looked around sullenly and noticed with obvious displeasure that the people in this place were extremely arrogant. Lu calmly and confidently explained that such behavior was completely normal, because the competition required one to show one's best. The situation was very different from the first meeting of the 18 nations. Previously, the countries had been of roughly equal power and had behaved cautiously. But since then, everything has changed, and now only 3 countries, Yangwa, Yugwa, and Legwa, have had real power and the right to decide. The winners of the last decades have invariably alternated between these 3 powers. The strong always remain strong, such are the laws. The alliance competition stipulated that the winner would receive the Advancement Stone, which accelerates the development of S-rank demons. But in addition, the leader of the victorious country became the commander of an army of 18 states, led the army of the alliance, and received the key to completion. In other words, the winning country will receive more S-rank representatives and increase its national power. In addition, the state that took first place received the right to destroy members of the alliance with impunity, as well as full access to the mineral resources in that place. Leo, not quite understanding what place exactly was being talked about, asked in bewilderment what exactly was meant. Lu explained that this was the tallest building in the entire demon clan, a place of great importance. Suddenly, a boy standing nearby asked, "Is this Symble's hotel?" Xiang Lin, who was standing nearby, irritably crossed her arms over her chest and noticed with obvious displeasure that strangers had come here again. Wu Juan muttered angrily that he couldn't stand this woman and asked if he could finish her off immediately. Lu, noticing his condition, worriedly told him to calm down and not to give in to provocations, reminding him that aggressive behavior before the start of the game would lead to disqualification. Wu Juan, growing increasingly angry, moved towards her, expressing a desire to beat her up. Lu, realizing what his temper could lead to, hurried to grab his arm, trying to stop him. Meanwhile, Leo kindly confirmed that this was indeed Xiamble's hotel, and with mild curiosity asked the boy if they had come here to participate in the competition. The boy nodded happily, saying that they were representing the Yugo country. Leo, approaching him and smiling, calmly said that if they were destined to meet in the arena, he asked not to spare him. The boy was embarrassed for a moment, but then nodded, promising that he would do his best. Lu suggested continuing on her way, but suddenly felt a slight movement behind her and the next moment realized that her backpack had been stolen. She screamed, telling everyone that their invitation cards had been stolen from her. Leo, watching him, noted with admiration the mastery of his technique, allowing him to hide. Wu Juan, seething with anger, demanded to know, with a threatening voice, who dared to do such a thing. Suddenly, the boy from Yugo turned to Leo and told her not to worry, asking her to take care of her sister. Then, concentrating enormous power within himself, he made a sharp gesture, and the ground beneath the enemy's feet trembled. Behind his back, wings suddenly opened, emitting incredible energy, and a deep blue light lit up his eyes, allowing him to see everything that was hidden. Using the cloud's ability, he sent a stream of ice towards the thief. The ice magic hit the target with amazing accuracy, instantly creating an ice road in front of him, making him visible. The man, stunned by the unexpected attack, wondered how he had been discovered. The next second, magical flowers filled with energy burst into flames in front of him, and Wu Juan, filled with rage, blocked his path. He crossed his arms over his chest and said with a grim grin that it was time for payback. The thief, realizing that there was no way out, almost crying, began to beg him to stop, offering to simply return the things and not create problems for each other. Meanwhile, Leo, watching the boy's sister, noted with a slight smile that her brother was doing well. The sister, feeling sincere pride for her brother, said yes. Lu, relieved, thanked the boy, admitting that without his help they probably wouldn't have been able to do it so quickly. Leo laughed, complimented his fighting techniques, and asked if he was an S-rank demon. La Ji, a little embarrassed by such a question, honestly answered that there were no demons of such a high rank in the Hugo country, but he would try his best. Wu Juan, hitting the thief one last time, said, "Finally, we have arrived." The thief, rising with difficulty, plaintively called for the guards, hoping that someone would intervene and protect him, while promising not to make such mistakes again. None of those present noticed that at that moment there was another demon on the second floor of the buildings. While sipping his tea, he calmly watched what was happening and muttered with a slight grin that the candidates continued to arrive, which meant that the most interesting part was just beginning. Standing in a long line, Lu looked around carefully and noted with slight surprise that many more people had arrived at the hotel than she had expected. She glanced at her watch and worriedly assumed that if they continued standing there, they would definitely be late for the banquet, which was supposed to start very soon. Leo, looking down the line with disdain, thought irritably about why no one knew that disabled people had to be let through. Several long, agonizing hours passed, and when their turn finally came, Leo said with obvious relief at last. Lou, out of concern, gave up her seat, gently wishing that the boy's sister could rest as soon as possible after waiting for so long. Zindi no dit gratefully, kuyutli tankinkev. Meanwhile, the strict manager demanded to see the documents, reminding that all the papers should be prepared in advance and not taken out at the last moment, delaying the cue. Xiang, calmly handing over the paper, asked if this was the document she meant. The girl looked up and explained that it was just an invitation and she needed documents for registration. Suddenly people began to whisper, look at each other in surprise, and it soon became clear that the reason for the noise was connected with the arrival of someone really important. Chief Sung Min chuckled, shaking his head, and with a slight hint of irony in his voice, he noted that the same thing happened every time. At this moment, Legwa's candidate, Lin Li, walked majestically into the hall. His appearance caused a stir, and people began to chatter animatedly, calling him the most famous contender for victory. The security immediately began to move the crowd to the sides, demanding that they make way and let Lin Li go ahead, without holding him back for a second. When he approached La Ji, his gaze changed abruptly, and something cold and piercing appeared in it. A moment later, without further ado, he pushed him aside with obvious contempt and said indifferently to the side. The boy's sister gasped in horror, and then, unable to hold back her tears, with despair in her eyes, she extended her hand, trying to help her brother. But before she could do anything, Leo quietly placed his hand on her shoulder, comforting her. Barely suppressed hatred flashed in his eyes as he glared at the guards who allowed such behavior. Meanwhile, the manager with a friendly smile suggested that Lin Li immediately go to the green zone, explaining that his mother was seriously ill and therefore he should not waste time in line. Lin Li, without even trying to hide his arrogance, nodded and threw out an order to go upstairs with his mother without waiting for him. He would join later, once everyone else had left. However, at this moment, Leo, unable to bear the injustice, instantly grabbed Lin Li's hand and forcefully pushed him aside. The guard standing next to him reacted instantly, rushing to support Lin Li so that he would not lose his balance. Leo, however, didn't pay any attention to this, confidently took the wheelchair and firmly declared that everyone was obliged to maintain order and there could be no exceptions. He glared at the manager, making it clear that he would not tolerate this kind of treatment any longer, and ordered that they be served first immediately. The woman froze for a moment, then looked at him with fear, not knowing how to react. Headmaster Sung Ming sighed heavily, realizing that the situation was starting again. He reminded that Lin Li was not just a star, but also the first person from the demon clan to have a title. Lin Li took a sharp step forward with a furious look in his eyes, and, unable to contain his anger, roared that this impudent fellow even dared to push him. Lin Li, with a slight but unkind smile, noticed that his interlocutor was brave to dare to offend his man. Leo turned his cold gaze to the manager and sternly asked if there were any errors in their evidence. Lin Li, without changing his expression, slowly extended his hand and placed it on Leo's shoulder. Then he calmly asked if he could hear him, reminding him who was in charge here. Without waiting for an answer, he tightened his grip without warning, his fingers digging into her shoulder. At this moment, Wu Juan, who had been watching the scene with undisguised rage, suddenly stepped forward and contemptuously ordered him to let go. Lin Li suddenly burst into loud laughter. The sound reverberated throughout the hall, causing the air to vibrate so violently that people began to take cover. Wu Juan tensed up in disbelief as he felt the incredible energy coming from Lin Li. Lin Li, clearly enjoying himself, admitted that he was even starting to like it and noted that his strength was impressive. He suggested doing it again. The old man reminded that any participant would be immediately disqualified if they started fighting before the official start of the tournament. He then added with an air of importance that Lin Li was a special person with VIP status, so there was no point in making him wait for the paperwork. Instead, he invited him to come to him personally. With a slight smile, he invited Lin Li to stay in one of the most luxurious rooms, kindly adding that this way he would not have to languish in anticipation among the common people. Lin Li, pleased with this treatment, agreed without hesitation and, smiling, promised that they would definitely meet at the competition. Wu Juan, not hiding his irritation, asked with obvious anger how much longer they would have to wait. The old man suddenly coughed, picked up the paper, then with an unperturbed expression said, "Let him take care of it." With a smile, he asked whether his interlocutor was a candidate and said that the girl would not be able to live here. La Ji, unable to hide his emotions, exclaimed that in the letter they received, there was no mention of a ban on family members coming. The old man asked with a grin if she was really a member of the family and asked how he could prove it, adding that evidence didn't work here. With a disdainful smirk, he stated that this place only gave priority to the tournament participants. Even the Yunhua country and its 2 candidates were only given standard numbers. Leo, hearing this, frowned, clearly irritated, wondering if the old man was provoking them. Wu Juan, losing his composure, grabbed the old man by the shirt and, seething with anger, shouted that they were candidates and had the right to a decent condition. But the old man only slyly asked who he considered himself to be, so that they would treat him specially, and asked who had invited them here, suggesting that they go home. He added that if he wanted a hit, then let him try, but warned that this would lead to disqualification from the tournament. Wu Juan gritted his teeth, angrily unclenched his fist, and let go, but the old man, displeased, reminded him that they had come for the competition, not for drinks and food. He expressed annoyance at the idea that these children were capable of anything at all, and suggested that perhaps this was the first time they had seen such tall buildings. He declared that the opportunity to come to their country for free was a real blessing for them. Wu Juan, barely containing his anger, bitterly noted that candidates could not raise their hands, otherwise they would be disqualified, and he realized that this was precisely why the old man was so insolent. The old man's face changed abruptly, saying that without the tournament he would never have gotten here. He added that it was high time to kick the countries of Yunhua and Hugo out of the alliance. Wu Juan, squeezing his fingers tightly on his face, hissed furiously that he would destroy him. But before he could finish speaking, the air suddenly flared with incredible force. Lu used her ability to make the old man fly into the air, and then with one sharp movement, she pulled him straight into her arms. She grabbed his face and, squeezing it slowly, declared in a menacing voice that she was not a candidate. Her figure soared above everyone, and with a voice full of authority, she loudly declared that she was the ruler of Yunhua. With incredible force, she threw the old man to the ground. Lu said she was the successor to Lu Yun, the first leader of the 18-nation alliance. She added without a shadow of a doubt that she had every right to execute him right here and now.